money is a tool, not the ultimate goal. Money holds a strange place in human life. On one hand, it is undeniably powerful. It allows us to secure food, shelter, education, healthcare, safety, and comfort. It opens doors to opportunities, enables experiences, and creates a sense of stability. On the other hand, it can also become a trap, turning into an obsession that consumes thought, effort, and time. When money is treated as the ultimate goal, life begins to revolve around accumulation rather than living. But money, in its essence, was never meant to be the destination. It is a tool, a means that helps us build the life we envision, not the life itself. If you see money as the ultimate goal, you risk becoming its servant. Every decision narrows into a calculation of profit and loss, and every moment is measured against potential earnings. Even victories feel hollow, because there is always more to chase. The person who only pursues wealth often discovers that no amount ever feels like enough. Riches grow, but so do desires, comparisons, and fears of losing what has been gained. In such a life, the tool becomes the master, and freedom is lost in the endless pursuit of numbers on a screen. When money is understood as a tool, its true value becomes clear. A tool is useful because of what it allows you to create, not because of the tool itself. A hammer is not treasured for being a hammer but for the house it helps to build. In the same way, money should not be revered simply because it accumulates. Its worth lies in how it is directed, toward building a secure home, supporting loved ones, gaining knowledge, experiencing the richness of the world, and contributing to causes that matter. Money in this sense serves life, rather than life serving money. Consider relationships. People who treat money as the highest goal often find themselves sacrificing family, friendships, and love in its pursuit. They work endless hours, neglect meaningful connections, and replace human warmth with material possessions. Yet those possessions cannot laugh with them, cannot share burdens, cannot bring comfort in the darkest moments. When money is seen as a tool, however, it can strengthen relationships rather than replace them. It can pay for a family trip that creates cherished memories, fund an education that shapes a child's future, or provide stability that reduces stress in a household. The same is true of personal growth. If money is the ultimate goal, learning becomes merely a strategy for earning more. But if money is a tool, it can be used to buy time for reflection, to explore passions, to invest in skills, or to support creative endeavors. It can serve as fuel for a life of meaning rather than an end in itself. The danger of mistaking money for the ultimate goal is that it narrows life into a single pursuit. Human beings are complex. We long for connection, purpose, beauty, freedom, and growth. Money can support all of these things, but it cannot replace them. It can buy a bed but not sleep, a house but not a home, entertainment but not joy, medicine but not health, luxuries but not peace. When people finally achieve financial abundance yet feel an emptiness inside, it is because they confuse the tool for the goal. This life lesson is not an argument against wealth. Money is important, and treating it as unimportant is as misguided as worshipping it. It must be earned, managed, and respected. But once it is placed in its proper role, it becomes liberating. You no longer chase it blindly, you direct it wisely. You use it to remove unnecessary burdens, to expand choices, and to invest in what truly matters. This shift in perspective transforms money from a master into a servant. The real goal of life is not the accumulation of wealth but the cultivation of meaning, fulfillment, and freedom. Money, when used as a tool, becomes a powerful ally in that pursuit. It allows you to take care of yourself and those you love, to pursue passions without constant fear of survival, to give generously, and to live in alignment with your values. In this way, money finds its rightful place, not as the ultimate goal, but as one of the instruments with which a meaningful and purposeful life is built. Continuous learning is survival. To understand why continuous learning is survival, one must first look at the nature of existence itself. Life is never still. It moves, transforms, and reshapes itself constantly. Every moment, the environment shifts, sometimes subtly, sometimes violently. The seasons change, societies evolve, technologies advance, economies rise and fall, relationships deepen or dissolve, and even within the individual, the body and mind grow older. Nothing remains fixed. In such a world, survival does not belong to the strongest in the rigid sense, but to those who can adapt, and adaptation is only possible through learning. To cease learning is to harden, and what hardens eventually breaks. In earlier ages, survival meant learning how to track animals, how to find edible plants, how to create fire, and how to defend oneself. Those who failed to learn these lessons simply did not live long enough to pass on their lineage. Today, survival wears a different face. It may not require hunting or fire-making, but it still demands learning. The pace of change has accelerated so drastically that knowledge grows outdated faster than ever before. Skills that were sufficient yesterday may be irrelevant tomorrow. A person who refuses to update their knowledge, who insists on relying only on what they already know, risks becoming useless in a world that has moved on without them. This is true not only of professions but of every dimension of life. In work, continuous learning means staying employable. Technologies emerge, industries shift, and entire fields vanish. A craftsman who never learns new techniques, a professional who never upgrades their skills, or a businessperson who ignores changing markets becomes vulnerable. In contrast, those who keep learning remain agile. They can move across roles, adapt to new tools, and remain valuable when others are displaced. The modern world rewards flexibility, and flexibility is born of learning. In relationships, continuous learning means staying connected. People change, the child becomes an adolescent, the partner evolves with age, the friend acquires new interests and struggles. If one insists on treating others as if they were frozen in time, misunderstandings and distance emerge. To love well requires learning continually about how to communicate, how to listen, how to forgive, and how to grow alongside others instead of apart from them. Relationships decay not because change occurs, but because one or both parties refuse to learn how to adapt to that change. Even survival of the spirit depends on learning. The human mind craves novelty and challenge. Without it, boredom sets in, followed by stagnation, and often despair. People who stop learning often feel their lives shrink, the world appears smaller, possibilities fewer, and hope dimmer. The refusal to learn becomes a refusal to engage with life itself. Conversely, those who keep learning find themselves constantly renewed. They approach the world with curiosity rather than fear, with openness rather than rigidity. Each lesson, whether from a book, a conversation, a mistake, or an observation, becomes nourishment that keeps the inner self alive and resilient. Nature itself offers countless metaphors for this truth. A tree that ceases to draw nutrients from the soil does not simply remain the same, it withers. A river that stops flowing becomes stagnant. A blade that is never sharpened becomes dull and useless. In the same way, a mind that stops learning decays. Knowledge, like oxygen, must be replenished constantly. Without it, the spirit suffocates. There is also a practical layer to this. Life inevitably delivers challenges, loss, failure, disappointment, crisis. In these moments, survival depends not on what you already know, but on your willingness to learn anew. To learn how to recover, how to rebuild, how to endure. The person who resists learning from hardship repeats the same mistakes, trapped in cycles of suffering. The one who embraces learning uses pain as a teacher, and in doing so becomes harder to break. Ultimately, continuous learning is survival because it keeps you aligned with reality. The world does not pause for anyone. If you cling only to yesterday's knowledge, you are trying to navigate today with a map that no longer matches the terrain. Learning updates the map. It allows you to see where you are, where you can go, and how to avoid the dangers along the way. Without it, you walk blind, vulnerable to every obstacle and shift. With it, you move with awareness, prepared for whatever comes. This lesson may sound demanding, as if life is asking us never to rest. But continuous learning is not a burden, it is a form of vitality. It does not mean constantly studying textbooks or acquiring formal credentials. It means staying curious, staying open, and treating every experience as a classroom. It means reading, listening, observing, asking questions, reflecting, and never assuming that you already know enough. In doing so, you remain alive not just in body but in mind and soul. To stop learning is to begin dying long before the body fails. To keep learning is to survive, to grow, and to thrive in a world that never ceases to change. Dreams require action. Dreams are powerful because they represent the highest expression of your hopes, values, and aspirations. They are the visions that give life its sense of purpose and direction. Yet, they are not self-fulfilling. A dream, no matter how vivid, remains intangible until it is paired with consistent, intentional action. Without action, dreams are like stars, beautiful to look at but infinitely distant, incapable of lighting your path in any practical way. Action is the bridge between imagination and reality, and without crossing that bridge, you will remain on the shore of what could be, never reaching the land of what is. One of the most common misconceptions about dreams is that clarity alone is enough, that if you visualize your goals vividly and believe strongly, the universe will conspire to make them happen. Visualization and belief are useful because they focus your mind and fuel motivation, but they are not substitutes for work. You can dream of writing a book, but until you sit down and write the first sentence, nothing exists. You can imagine financial freedom, but until you learn, plan, and act, you remain in the same place. Dreams without action create a comforting illusion of progress. They give you the emotional high of possibility without the discomfort of effort. That is why they are so seductive, and so dangerous. The reality is that dreams are not magic, they are blueprints. A blueprint without construction remains a piece of paper, no matter how elegant the design. Construction is labor. It is repetition, discipline, and perseverance. It is waking up early when you want to sleep, working when no one notices, and pushing forward when the initial excitement fades. This is the part most people resist because the path of action feels less glamorous than the dream itself. Dreaming is easy because it costs nothing. Action is hard because it demands sacrifice, time, energy, comfort, and sometimes pride. But every sacrifice becomes an investment in something greater than ease, fulfillment. Action matters because it transforms uncertainty into clarity. You can spend months or years imagining how something will unfold, but the truth is revealed only when you start moving. Action is feedback. It shows you what works and what doesn't. It helps you refine your plan and discover hidden obstacles. For example, an aspiring entrepreneur may spend endless nights drafting business ideas, yet only after launching a small prototype does reality speak. That experience, not the daydream, teaches lessons about customers, costs, and resilience. The same principle applies to every dream. Until you step into the arena, you are dealing with theory, not truth. Another reason dreams require action is that motion builds momentum, and momentum builds belief. Many people wait for confidence before taking the first step, thinking, "I'll start when I feel ready." But readiness is not a prerequisite for action, it is a product of it. The first step is often awkward, the second still shaky, but with repetition, confidence grows. You begin to trust your ability to adapt, and that trust propels you forward. Action turns doubt into evidence, proof that progress is possible. Without that proof, dreams remain abstract, and abstraction breeds paralysis. Consistency is the heartbeat of action. A single burst of energy is not enough to sustain a dream. Achieving anything meaningful, whether mastering a skill, building a business, or creating art, requires habits that endure beyond inspiration. Inspiration sparks the journey, but discipline carries it to completion. There will be days when excitement fades, when obstacles loom, and when the dream feels out of reach. In those moments, discipline, doing the work even when you don't feel like it, is what separates achievers from dreamers. Every day of consistent effort becomes a brick in the foundation of your vision, until the structure is strong enough to stand on its own. Action also requires courage because it invites vulnerability. When you keep a dream locked in your mind, it is safe. It cannot fail there. The moment you act, you expose it, and yourself, to the possibility of failure, criticism, and disappointment. This is why so many people cling to dreaming instead of doing. Fear disguises itself as preparation. They tell themselves, "I need more time," or "I'm not ready," when the truth is they fear rejection or falling short. But fear cannot be outthought, it must be outacted. Each step you take weakens its hold because courage is not the absence of fear but the decision to move forward despite it. The harsh truth is that dreams without action do not just remain unfulfilled, they become sources of pain. Over time, unacted dreams turn into regrets that weigh on the soul. You will find yourself asking, "What if I had tried?" and there is no answer that suits that question. Failure hurts, but regret is worse because failure teaches while regret only lingers. People on their deathbeds rarely say they regret trying and failing, they regret never trying at all. Inaction is the silent killer of potential. It is important to note that action does not mean recklessness or random motion. Effective action is intentional and incremental. Start where you are, with what you have, and take the smallest possible step toward the dream. If you want to run a marathon, you start by walking a mile. If you want to build a company, you start by testing an idea. Perfection is not required, persistence is. The perfect plan is a myth that keeps you waiting for a moment that never arrives. Progress is messy. Dreams are not built in straight lines, they are sculpted through trial, error, adjustment, and persistence. Ultimately, dreams require action because life is finite. Every day you delay, the window narrows. Time does not pause for hesitation. The longer you wait, the heavier the weight of unrealized potential becomes. Dreams are gifts, but they demand a response. Will you let them die in the comfort of imagination, or will you give them breath through effort? Vision without execution is fantasy. Action is the lifeblood of achievement, the only force capable of turning one day into day one. And when you finally act, you discover a profound truth: the dream was never about the distant destination, but about the person you become in the pursuit of it. Success is a marathon, not a sprint. Success is a marathon, not a sprint, because anything worth having is built over time through steady effort, thoughtful pacing, and the willingness to keep moving even when progress is invisible. A sprint is an all-out burst, maximum speed, maximum output, and maximum exhaustion in service of a very short distance. It wins races that are measured in seconds. But the largest, most meaningful goals, mastery of a craft, a durable career, a healthy relationship, a sustainable business, a life of purpose, are measured in years and decades. They reward endurance, strategy, and patience far more than raw speed. Think about how a runner trains. Early on, they build a base, lots of slow, steady mileage that strengthens the heart, tendons, and mental capacity to keep going. Only after the base is established do they add intervals, hills, and faster sessions to sharpen speed. They plan for rest, for recovery, for nutrition, and for the seasons when progress feels flat. Success in real life follows the same logic. The long game requires building foundations, habits, skills, relationships, finances, that compound. You cannot shortcut that base without paying later in injury, burnout, or failure. Compounding is the engine of marathon success. Small, consistent actions invested daily, reading a little, practicing deliberately, saving a portion of income, making one more sales call, accumulate into large advantages over time. Two people can begin at similar places, but the one who consistently invests an extra 1% each day will diverge dramatically over months and years. This is the quiet arithmetic of long-term wins. Incremental improvements, repeated without spectacular drama, eventually produce outsized outcomes. Pacing matters because human systems are finite. Time, energy, attention, these are the currencies you spend on progress. Sprinting through months of feverish work might produce a short-term spike, a launch, a big sale, a viral moment. But without replenishment, those spikes are followed by crashes. The marathon mindset treats energy as a resource to steward. It plans for rest days, for sleep, for boundaries that prevent emotional and physical depletion. It recognizes that productivity is not a measure of how many hours you burn through but of how sustainably you can produce value over a lifetime. The marathon approach also reframes failure. In a sprint culture, failure is a catastrophe, an abrupt end that precludes winning. In a marathon mindset, failure is data, a stumble on a long road that teaches about footing, weather, and pace. You expect setbacks. You design systems that let you learn quickly and adjust without losing the race. That means measuring the right things, input metrics you can control, hours of practice, customer interviews, pages written, rather than brittle output metrics, instant fame, overnight success. Focus on the process because process yields predictability, obsession with outcomes yields anxiety. A marathon mentality encourages patience with plateaus. Plateaus are inevitable. Skills consolidate below the surface, competence grows in ways that look like nothing is happening. If you abandon effort at the first stall, you sabotage long-term results for short-term comfort. Athletes, artists, and entrepreneurs all know this. The week you want to quit is often the week before a breakthrough. Staying through plateaus is less about heroic grit and more about systems, habit scaffolding, accountability, and small rituals that keep you moving even when progress is invisible. Strategic variability is another element. Marathons are not run at a single pace from start to finish. Runners reserve energy for the latter miles, they accelerate where it counts. Likewise, long-term success benefits from alternating phases, periods of intense focus to build, deliberate rest to absorb, and phases of exploration to innovate. This is often called periodization in training or experimentation cycles in business. You need sprints inside the marathon, bursts of concentrated effort, yet these must be placed intentionally, not as a default mode. Too many unplanned sprints lead to burnout, well-timed sprints lead to strategic advantage. Identity and narrative are crucial. People who treat success as a marathon build identities not around single achievements but around the kind of person who shows up consistently, curious, disciplined, adaptable. They ask, what kind of daily life would produce this outcome, rather than, how quickly can I get there? Anchoring success to values and habits makes the journey sustainable and meaningful. When your sense of self depends on short-term results, you become brittle. When it's rooted in ongoing learning and contribution, you become resilient. Environment and social support are part of the course. Marathons are run with communities, coaches, pacers, fellow runners who know the route. Your work benefits similarly from mentors, peers, and systems of feedback. Find people who model longevity, who normalize the idea of slow, steady growth, and who will call you in when you start sprinting toward exhaustion or chasing empty metrics. Protect your time like a long-run training block, guard it from meaningless meetings, short-lived trends, and the trap of constant reactivity. Beware of the cultural myth of overnight success. The headlines focus on the sprint, the sudden launch, the viral breakout, because those moments are dramatic. The truth behind most sudden success stories is years of invisible work. Celebrating only the endpoint creates unrealistic expectations and fuels dangerous shortcuts, grand gestures in place of daily discipline, hype in place of skills, and leverage in place of legitimacy. A marathon mindset rewards humility. You accept that mastery is accretive and that reputation is forged in the quiet between public wins. Finally, a marathon approach is humane. It lets you build a life that includes relationships, health, curiosity, and contribution alongside achievement. It asks you to value the means as much as the ends because the means, what you practice daily, become the life you live. If you win a sprint at the cost of your health or the love of people you care about, you have paid too high a price. If you run the marathon wisely, you may not only reach the finish line but also enjoy the scenery, support others on the route, and have energy left to build a new race. To adopt this lesson in practical terms, set long horizons and break them into manageable milestones, prioritize habits and input measurements over chasing instant outcomes, plan cycles of work and deliberate rest, learn to extract learning fast from setbacks, cultivate relationships and mentors who model longevity, and root your identity in being the person who keeps showing up, not in single-pulse triumphs. Success that lasts is lived day by day, season by season. Treat it like a marathon, pace yourself, build your base, respect recovery, and trust that consistent, intelligent effort will carry you farther than short bursts of speed ever could. Time is your most valuable asset. Time is the most valuable asset you possess because it is the only resource that is both finite and non-renewable. You cannot manufacture more of it, cannot borrow it, and cannot save it for later use. From the moment you are born, your time begins to run out, and every passing second brings you closer to the end of your life. Unlike money, which can be lost and regained, or possessions, which can be replaced, time once spent is gone forever. This truth makes time infinitely precious, yet paradoxically, it is the resource most people squander without thought. Every day, you are given the same 24 hours as the most successful, wealthy, and influential people in the world. What sets them apart is not that they have more time, but that they understand its value and allocate it deliberately. When you waste time on trivial activities, mindless scrolling, gossip, procrastination, you are making a trade. You are exchanging pieces of your finite existence for something that provides no real return. These trades seem harmless in the moment because time feels abundant, especially when you are young. But the illusion of abundance fades with age, and by the time most people realize how valuable time truly is, much of it has already slipped away. Consider the concept of opportunity cost. Every minute spent on something unimportant is a minute stolen from something that could have brought meaning, growth, or fulfillment. When you choose to binge watch for hours, you are choosing not to learn a new skill, not to deepen your relationships, not to work on your goals. Time is the ultimate zero-sum game. You cannot do everything, so everything you do comes at the cost of something else. This makes every decision about time a decision about your life. What magnifies the value of time even further is its uncertainty. You do not know how much you have left. You may have decades ahead of you, or only days. This unpredictability should fill you with urgency, not a frantic rush, but a sense of purpose. It should push you to use each moment wisely, to prioritize the people and activities that truly matter. When you understand that time could run out at any moment, you stop postponing dreams for someday, because you realize that someday is not guaranteed. The phrase, "I don't have time," is often a lie. The truth is you are choosing to allocate your time elsewhere. When you say, "I don't have time to exercise," what you are really saying is, "I choose not to prioritize my health." When you say, "I don't have time to call my family," you are choosing not to prioritize that relationship. Time reveals your values because how you spend it reflects what you truly care about, not what you claim to care about. Time's value also lies in its compounding effect. Just like money can grow through interest, time invested wisely multiplies its returns. If you dedicate even an hour a day to learning, creating, or improving yourself, the cumulative effect over years is massive. Conversely, time wasted also compounds. A few minutes of distraction might seem harmless, but repeated daily over years, it adds up to entire seasons of life lost to nothingness. This is why habits matter. They are the architecture of how your time is spent, and thus the architecture of your life. Think about what happens when people near the end of their lives. Almost no one wishes they had spent more time working overtime, scrolling through social media, or watching television. They wish they had spent more time with loved ones, pursuing passions, and living fully. They regret not the things they did, but the things they postponed, because time ran out before they could do them. That is the ultimate proof of time's supremacy. When everything else loses meaning, time remains the currency of life. Health, wealth, relationships, all depend on time. Without it, nothing else matters. Unlike money or status, time cannot be inherited, stored, or earned back. Every sunrise is a deposit into an account that cannot be refilled. The balance decreases with every heartbeat. You do not control how much is in the account, but you control how you spend it. And the way you spend your time is the way you live your life. If you waste time, you waste life. If you value time, you value life. This is not a metaphor, it is a reality. One day, the account will hit zero, and in that moment, you will not wish for more money, more possessions, or more recognition. You will wish for more time, time to love, to create, to experience, to live. But by then, it will be too late. The clock does not stop for anyone. That is why the wisest people guard their time more fiercely than their wealth. They understand that time is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Every dream, every relationship, every achievement requires time as its raw material. Waste it, and you waste the possibility of everything you could have been. Protect it, and you protect the essence of your life. The greatest tragedy is not dying too soon, it is living too long without truly living, because you squandered the only resource that mattered. And that resource is time. Discipline beats motivation. Discipline beats motivation because motivation is a fleeting emotion, while discipline is a stable system. Motivation feels exciting, powerful, and inspiring in the moment, but it is temporary by nature. It comes when conditions are favorable, when you feel energized, when the goal seems attractive, when everything aligns. But life rarely provides perfect conditions. There will be mornings when you are tired, days when the goal feels distant, and seasons when the work becomes repetitive and unrewarding. In those moments, motivation vanishes. If you rely on it, you will quit. Discipline, however, does not care about mood. Discipline is the commitment to act according to principles and priorities, regardless of how you feel in the moment. It is the ability to keep showing up even when the excitement is gone. People often confuse motivation with progress. They believe that because they feel inspired today, they will succeed tomorrow. But motivation is only a spark. It can ignite the fire, but it cannot keep it burning. The fuel that sustains the fire is discipline, the small, repeated actions that accumulate over time. Writing a book is not about the day you feel like an artist, it is about the 100 days you write when no one is reading. Building a business is not about the moment you feel visionary, it is about the late nights, the hard calls, and the persistence when results are invisible. Motivation may start the journey, but discipline finishes it. Discipline works because it removes choice from the equation. When you rely on motivation, every day becomes a negotiation with yourself. Do I feel like working out today? Do I feel like studying? Do I feel like making those calls? Most days, the answer will be no, because the brain is wired to avoid discomfort and conserve energy. Discipline ends the debate. It replaces mood with structure. It says, "This is what I do, no matter how I feel." That shift is powerful because feelings are unreliable, systems are not. When habits are built, action becomes automatic. You no longer depend on the fragile push of motivation because the behavior has become part of who you are. Motivation is emotional, discipline is rational. Motivation thrives on novelty and reward. It is strong at the beginning when the goal is exciting, but it fades when the grind sets in. Discipline, by contrast, is built on clarity and consistency. It does not chase highs, it tolerates boredom. It recognizes that real growth happens in the repetition, the unglamorous, often monotonous practice that sharpens skills and builds strength. Athletes, musicians, entrepreneurs, all understand this truth. Greatness is not the product of occasional bursts of energy, it is the outcome of daily discipline executed over years. The beauty of discipline is that it creates freedom. This sounds paradoxical because discipline feels like restriction, but in reality, it liberates you from the chaos of indecision and the tyranny of moods. A disciplined person does not waste time debating whether to act, they simply act. That consistency compounds into mastery, and mastery creates options. The person who disciplines their finances gains financial freedom. The person who disciplines their health enjoys a body that moves without pain. The person who disciplines their craft earns opportunities that the undisciplined never see. Freedom is not the absence of rules, it is the result of rules applied to what matters most. Motivation is external as much as internal. It often depends on stimuli, a video, a quote, a pep talk, a success story. That is why people chase motivational content endlessly, hoping to stay inspired. But no amount of motivation can substitute for the habit of showing up. Discipline internalizes what motivation externalizes. It says, even without applause, even without energy, even without visible results, I will do the work. That quiet persistence is what separates those who dream from those who achieve. Dreams are fueled by emotion, but achievements are built by execution. Discipline also builds resilience. When motivation fails and obstacles arise, the undisciplined quit because they were relying on feeling good to keep going. The disciplined adapt. They understand that difficulty is not a signal to stop, it is part of the process. They do not collapse under setbacks because their commitment is not fragile, it does not depend on constant encouragement. Over time, this resilience compounds into confidence. You begin to trust yourself because you have evidence that you can act even when it is hard. That trust is the foundation of self-respect, and it is earned through discipline, not inspiration. In every meaningful pursuit, fitness, learning, building wealth, mastering a craft, the winners are not the most motivated, they are the most disciplined. The athlete who trains on the days they feel lazy beats the one who waits for energy. The writer who writes when uninspired finishes books, the one who waits for the muse does not. The entrepreneur who works through discouragement builds businesses, the one who waits for passion abandons ideas at the first obstacle. Talent matters. Motivation helps. But discipline decides. The ultimate truth is that discipline creates motivation, not the other way around. When you act consistently, you see progress. Progress generates momentum. Momentum reignites motivation. This is why disciplined people seem highly motivated. They are not waiting to feel like acting, they act, and the feeling follows. If you reverse the order and wait for motivation first, you will wait forever. Success is not about doing what you love when you feel like it is about doing what is necessary even when you do not. That is the essence of discipline, and that is why it always beats motivation. Start before you feel ready. The idea of starting before you feel ready carries within it one of the most transformative truths about growth, progress, and achievement. Most people wait for the perfect moment to begin, a moment when they believe they will have acquired enough knowledge, gained enough confidence, or arranged enough resources. Yet that moment rarely arrives, because readiness is not a fixed state that descends upon you with clarity and certainty. It is a feeling constructed through experience. Waiting for readiness is often just another name for fear, hesitation, or perfectionism disguised as preparation. The paradox is that the very act of beginning is what creates the sense of readiness you long for. When you start before you feel ready, you force yourself to step into the unknown, and it is in that uncomfortable space that learning accelerates. No amount of planning or theorizing can replicate the lessons that come from direct action. Reading about swimming can never equal the moment of entering the water, and studying leadership cannot replace the trial of leading real people with real stakes. The discomfort you feel when you start prematurely is not proof that you are unqualified, it is proof that you are standing at the threshold of growth. Those who achieve great things are not those who waited until all fear was gone, but those who moved forward while carrying their fear, trusting that clarity would emerge along the way. Beginning before you feel prepared also breaks the cycle of procrastination that perfectionism breeds. Many people believe they need to master every detail before they take the first step, but in reality, mastery only comes through iteration. A writer who waits until they can write perfectly will never write. An entrepreneur who waits until every risk is eliminated will never build. An athlete who waits until they are already strong will never train. By starting early, you give yourself permission to improve in public, to refine your skills as you go, and to fail in ways that teach rather than paralyze. Action breeds momentum, and momentum creates confidence far more effectively than endless planning. There is also a psychological liberation in moving forward without waiting for readiness. If you demand perfection before you begin, you attach your self-worth to flawless outcomes, which sets up inevitable disappointment. But if you start while acknowledging that you are a work in progress, you shift your focus from results to growth. Each misstep becomes part of the process rather than a verdict on your potential. This mindset transforms fear of failure into willingness to experiment, and that willingness is the soil from which innovation and creativity grow. Every invention, every work of art, every breakthrough in science or business has its roots in a moment when someone acted without guarantees. Starting before you feel ready also aligns with the reality that the world is constantly changing. Conditions will never be perfect, markets will never be fully predictable, and circumstances will always carry risk. Waiting for readiness is, in a sense, waiting for an illusion. By beginning early, you position yourself ahead of the curve, adapting in real time rather than preparing endlessly for a reality that may already be shifting. Those who succeed often do not have more knowledge than others, they have simply chosen to enter the arena sooner, learning on the job while others are still standing on the sidelines. This lesson applies not only to careers or ambitions but also to personal life. Relationships, for example, rarely begin when two people feel completely prepared. They begin with uncertainty, vulnerability, and a willingness to step into the unknown. Parenting is never a role anyone feels truly ready for, yet countless people discover resilience and love they never imagined only after the child arrives. Even profound changes in lifestyle, moving to a new place, starting a new habit, leaving behind a toxic environment, often begin with hesitation. Readiness follows courage, not the other way around. At a deeper level, starting before you feel ready is a commitment to trust yourself. It means accepting that while you may not have all the answers now, you have the ability to figure them out as you go. It is an act of faith in your adaptability, resilience, and intelligence. The truth is that no one ever has everything figured out at the beginning. Even the most successful people, when looking back, admit that they stumbled, improvised, and learned as they moved forward. By waiting, you miss opportunities that might have carried you further than you imagined. By starting, you give yourself the chance to surprise yourself. This lesson also reshapes the way you view courage. Many believe courage means feeling fearless, but true courage is acting despite fear. To start before you feel ready is to embody that definition. You acknowledge your uncertainty but refuse to let it dictate your choices. Over time, this practice builds resilience. The more often you leap before you feel prepared, the more evidence you gather that you can survive, learn, and adapt. Eventually, what once felt terrifying becomes routine, and your zone of capability expands. This is how growth compounds, not in waiting, but in stepping forward again and again, even when your heart races. In the end, readiness is not a prerequisite but a result. You do not prepare until you feel confident, you act until confidence arrives. Every skill you admire in others, every mastery you aspire to, began in a moment of uncertainty where someone chose to begin despite not being fully prepared. The difference between those who achieve and those who stay stuck is rarely intelligence or talent, it is the decision to begin imperfectly. Life will not pause until you feel ready, opportunities will not wait at the door forever. When you start before you feel prepared, you align with the rhythm of life itself, which rewards movement, experimentation, and boldness over hesitation. And in that decision to begin, you discover that readiness is not something you wait for, it is something you build along the way. Failures are stepping stones. Failure is not the opposite of progress, it is one of its most honest instruments. When a project collapses, a plan derails, or a relationship breaks down, what many see at first glance is an end. Closer up, however, failure is information, a body of evidence about what didn't work, for whom, and under what conditions. Treated as mere shame or as a final verdict, failure narrows your options and hardens you into fear. Treated instead as data, it widens your gaze and becomes the raw material for wiser choices. Each misstep leaves a footprint, sometimes painful, often humbling, that, if examined, tells you where the ground is weak, where the path bends, and where you might place your next step more securely. To understand failures as stepping stones, you must change the axis of judgment from identity to process. When you say, "I failed," you conflate a transient result with your entire self. When you say, "This failed," you isolate an experiment from your personhood. The distinction is simple but seismic. The latter language invites curiosity: what conditions produced the result? What assumptions were wrong? What variables did I not control? It turns a blow to the ego into a prompt for learning. This is the mindset that turns the trial and error of childhood play into the sophisticated iteration of an adult craftsman. You try, observe, adjust, and try again, gradually refining technique until the skill becomes fluent. Failure also performs an essential emotional function. Small, safe failures inoculate you against the paralyzing dread of catastrophe. The first time you try something difficult and stumble, the sting is acute. The 10th time, your nervous system begins to register attempt as normal, not as threat. Over repeated exposure, risk loses its mystical power to immobilize you. This is not about courting needless pain, it is about building tolerance and learning that discomfort does not equal doom. Courage is not the absence of fear but the practiced ability to act despite it, and failure is the rehearsal space where that ability is built. There is a structural logic to how failures compound into success. Knowledge accumulates by falsification. Every failed hypothesis eliminates possibilities and thereby narrows the search. In craft and entrepreneurship, each unsuccessful project teaches what features customers don't value, what processes slow production, which partnerships introduce fragility. In relationships, every misunderstanding clarified by conflict teaches boundaries and communication. Each negative outcome reduces entropy in your decision-making, making your subsequent choices more informed. This compounding effect is why persistence coupled with reflection is so powerful. It converts random mistakes into a steadily improving algorithm for action. But stepping stone failures require two deliberate practices: reflection and humility. Reflection means pausing to extract the lesson, not to dwell in recrimination, but to translate loss into insight. Ask specific questions: what exactly happened? Which of my assumptions were false? Which actions produced outcomes I can measure? Write the answers down, because the act of articulating makes vague lessons concrete. Humility means accepting that you lack knowledge or control. It allows you to solicit help, read, experiment, and perhaps to pivot. Pride that insists on doing the same thing louder guarantees repetition of error. Humility invites adaptation and reduces the social cost of failing, making it easier to iterate publicly and learn rapidly. There are also social and moral dimensions to how failures serve as stepping stones. In cultures and organizations that punish mistakes without inquiry, people hide errors, repeat them, and stagnate. In environments that treat failure as a moment for debrief and redesign, innovation flourishes. Creating such a climate requires leaders who model vulnerability, who can name a mistake, explain the lesson, and show the corrective route without excusing negligence. For individuals, surrounding yourself with trusted people who provide frank, compassionate feedback accelerates learning. The right mirror shows you what you are missing. The wrong mirror amplifies blind spots. Not all failures are equal, and not all require persistence. There is a distinction between iteration and stubbornness. A stepping stone failure is one you analyze, learn from, and use to improve the next attempt. A trap failure is one you repeat without learning because you refuse to update your map. The test is whether each failure moves you closer to clarity. If failures leave you with the same confusion, the problem is not failure itself but the absence of honest inquiry. Another distinction is between avoidable and unavoidable failures. Some mistakes come from negligence and are rightly preventable, others are the cost of trying things that matter. Accepting the latter as the tuition of growth, while minimizing the former through discipline, is the craft of resilient people. Failure's alchemy also lies in the stories we tell about it. A setback framed as, "proof I am no good," produces resignation, framed as, "proof I risked something that mattered," produces dignity. The narrative you choose matters because it shapes motivation. If you reduce your identity to outcomes, success is a brittle trophy. If you root it in striving, failure becomes testament to courage. This does not mean romanticizing every loss, it means balancing realism about costs with generosity toward your own effort. Finally, the cumulative ethic of treating failures as stepping stones transforms how you approach life's big margins. It encourages experiments, short, cheap, honest tests of your ideas and your limits. It privileges speed of learning over speed of success. It normalizes course correction and celebrates the small victories that signal true progress: better questions asked, cleaner processes developed, relationships repaired, patterns of behavior altered. Step by step, the mountain that once seemed insurmountable becomes a staircase made not of polished marble but of rough, honest stones, each one quarried from an experience you lived through, examined, and used. Failure does not erase the pain it causes, but it can transmute that pain into direction. When you treat stumbles as necessary engineering data and emotional training rather than as verdicts on your worth, the path forward becomes not a straight line but an upward arc forged by persistence, reflection, and courage. Hard work beats talent. Talent is a gift, but hard work is a choice, and choice, exercised with consistency, almost always outperforms natural advantage. Talent may open the door, but hard work determines whether you walk through and how far you go beyond it. Many people are born with innate abilities, intelligence, athleticism, creativity, but talent without effort is like a seed never planted. It holds potential, but potential alone achieves nothing. The world is filled with stories of brilliant minds who squandered opportunities because they relied solely on what came easily, and equally filled with stories of ordinary individuals who achieved greatness by refusing to stop trying. Hard work beats talent because effort compounds over time, whereas talent without discipline stagnates. Skill is not static, it erodes when unused and expands when exercised. A talented person who coasts on ability might shine early, but they eventually plateau. Meanwhile, someone less gifted but relentless in practice climbs steadily, surpassing the once gifted rival. This is the law of compounded effort. An hour a day, repeated for years, produces mastery far beyond what raw aptitude alone can sustain. Hard work is a multiplier. It magnifies whatever talent you have, and in its absence, talent remains undeveloped. Another reason hard work prevails is adaptability. Hard-working individuals learn how to learn. They embrace feedback, iterate after failure, and build resilience. Talent can breed complacency, and complacency resists growth. When challenges arise, the naturally gifted who never cultivated grit often falter because they lack the muscle memory of persistence. Hard work, by contrast, inoculates you against failure because it normalizes struggle. Every obstacle becomes another exercise in problem solving, not a verdict on your worth. Over time, this resilience becomes a decisive advantage because success in any meaningful pursuit is never linear. It is littered with setbacks only perseverance can overcome. Hard work also creates opportunities that talent alone cannot access. The person who shows up consistently, delivers beyond expectation, and keeps improving becomes visible in ways the coasting talent does not. Effort signals commitment, and commitment attracts trust, whether from mentors, collaborators, or employers. Opportunities tend to flow toward those who demonstrate reliability and drive because those qualities are scarce and valuable. Talent might earn admiration, but hard work earns doors opening at critical moments. Moreover, hard work teaches qualities that make achievement sustainable: discipline, patience, humility. Discipline ensures you act even when motivation fades. Patience allows you to endure the slow grind where progress is invisible. Humility keeps you coachable and willing to start at the bottom if necessary. These virtues are not innate, they are forged in the repeated act of showing up, of doing the difficult thing when no one applauds. Talent, in contrast, can tempt you into entitlement, believing success is guaranteed because of your gift. That illusion is dangerous because reality eventually demands dues, and only effort pays them. Some argue that talent sets the ceiling for success. That may be true in domains of extreme specialization, like professional sports or elite arts, but even there, the ceiling is unreachable without relentless practice. A gifted runner who never trains will lose to a less naturally fast runner who trains daily. A musically inclined child who never practices will remain mediocre compared to one who labors at scales for years. In the vast majority of endeavors, business, leadership, personal growth, the ceiling is elastic because skills can be learned. Hard work stretches the ceiling so far that what once seemed impossible becomes routine. Consider also the psychological effect of relying on hard work. It gives you agency. Talent is something you receive, effort is something you control. Anchoring your self-worth in an unearned gift makes it fragile. You fear failure because it threatens your identity as talented. Anchoring it in effort makes you resilient because setbacks are not indictments but invitations to adjust and improve. When you believe in effort, you believe in growth. When you believe only in talent, you believe in limits. Hard work is not glamorous. It often looks like monotony, early mornings, late nights, repetition without immediate reward. That is why few embrace it and why those who do stand out. The quiet hours of practice, the revisions no one sees, the discipline to stay when others quit, these build an edge that compounds invisibly until the day it becomes undeniable. On that day, people will call you gifted or lucky, not realizing that luck favors those who prepare relentlessly and gifts bloom only when tended with care. In the end, talent sets the stage, but hard work writes the script. Talent can impress, but hard work inspires because it is proof of choice, persistence, and will. When talent and hard work unite, the results can be extraordinary. But when they compete, hard work almost always wins, not because it makes you exceptional overnight, but because it refuses to stop while talent waits for the world to bend to its ease. Success bows not to promise, but to perseverance. Relationships matter more than things. Life is often measured by what we accumulate: houses, cars, gadgets, accolades, but when you strip away the noise, what truly endures are the connections you share with other people. Relationships, not things, form the fabric of a meaningful existence. Objects may offer convenience and fleeting pleasure, but they cannot laugh with you when life is beautiful, nor hold your hand when life becomes unbearable. A luxury car cannot comfort you during grief. A mansion cannot sit beside you in silence and understand. Things can fill a space, but only people can fill a heart. The value of relationships is rooted in their ability to give life texture, depth, and resilience. No matter how successful you become, your joy is amplified when you have someone to share it with. A victory celebrated alone feels hollow, like applause echoing in an empty theater. On the other hand, even ordinary moments, sharing a meal, walking in the park, exchanging a smile, become rich when shared with someone you care about. This is because human beings are wired for connection. Psychologically, belonging is not a luxury, it is a basic need. Our nervous system seeks safety in closeness, and our minds find meaning in being understood. When relationships are absent or shallow, loneliness creeps in, and loneliness is not just sadness, it is a health risk, linked to stress, disease, and early death. No object, no matter how expensive, can heal that void. What makes relationships more valuable than things is their living nature. Objects depreciate over time, their novelty fades, their edges wear down, and their function eventually fails. Relationships, when nurtured, appreciate. They grow deeper through shared experiences, laughter, vulnerability, and forgiveness. A conversation with an old friend, decades into the bond, carries a richness no brand new purchase can match. The story of your life is not written in the things you own, it is written in the people who walked beside you, their names, their voices, their presence in your memories. Long after the car rusts and the phone is obsolete, the warmth of those moments remains. Yet modern life tempts us to invert these priorities. In the pursuit of material success, people often sacrifice time with loved ones. They work late hours to buy bigger houses, only to come home to empty rooms. They give children the latest toys but starve them of attention. They shower partners with gifts but neglect the simple gift of listening. The tragedy is that things are replaceable, but people are not. A friend who drifts away because you were too busy, a child who grows up feeling unseen, a marriage that withers from neglect, these losses cannot be undone by money or possessions. When you are at the end of your life, you will not crave another paycheck or another gadget, you will crave the presence of those who loved you, and regret the moments you failed to give them. Relationships matter more because they shape your character. Who you spend time with influences your habits, your values, your worldview. Surround yourself with people who uplift you, and you grow into someone better. Surround yourself with negativity, and you shrink. Things do not challenge you to become more patient, generous, or compassionate, relationships do. They stretch you, test you, and ultimately refine you. Through conflict, you learn humility. Through caring for someone else, you learn selflessness. No object can teach you these lessons because things require nothing from you but payment. Consider also the resilience relationships provide in crisis. When illness strikes, when a dream collapses, when grief knocks the breath out of you, it is people, not possessions, that sustain you. A sofa cannot listen to your heartbreak. A bank account cannot offer empathy. But a friend's voice on the other end of the line, a parent's embrace, a partner's steady presence, these are lifelines. They do not erase pain, but they make it bearable. And when joy returns, sharing it doubles its brightness in a way no object ever could. Ultimately, the hierarchy is clear: things support life, but relationships give it meaning. Things can decorate your existence, but relationships define it. At funerals, nobody speaks of the cars someone drove or the clothes they wore, they speak of kindness, loyalty, laughter shared, love given. That is the measure of a life well lived, not the inventory of possessions but the legacy of connection. To live wisely is to remember this truth daily, invest less in what rusts and more in what lasts. Guard your time for those who matter, for time spent with people you love is the one thing you will never regret. The shine of objects fades, but the light of love remains, and in the end, that light is all that matters. Comparison kills joy. Comparison is one of the most subtle thieves of happiness because it rarely announces its presence. It slips into your thoughts when you see someone achieve what you have not, own what you cannot, or live in a way you imagine is better than your own. At first, it seems harmless, a quick glance at another's progress or possessions, but soon it begins to distort the lens through which you view your own life. What was once enough suddenly feels insufficient. Your achievements lose their shine, not because they have changed, but because you have measured them against someone else's yardstick. Joy, which once grew from gratitude and purpose, is poisoned by the illusion that you are behind. The danger of comparison lies in its fundamental unfairness. You compare your behind-the-scenes struggles to someone else's highlight reel. Social media amplifies this imbalance, feeding you curated snapshots of victories without the accompanying failures, doubts, and sacrifices. You see their polished result and forget the invisible labor that made it possible. Worse, you overlook that every life has its own terrain, shaped by circumstances you cannot fully see, upbringing, opportunities, setbacks, privileges, and values. To compare your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20 is not just unhelpful, it is dishonest to the reality of both lives. Comparison kills joy because it shifts your focus from sufficiency to scarcity. It teaches you to look outward instead of inward, to measure worth by relative standing rather than intrinsic value. In this mindset, someone else's gain feels like your loss, as if life were a zero-sum game where their light casts a shadow over you. But life is not a race with one finish line, it is an open field where countless paths can lead to fulfillment. The tragedy of comparison is that it blinds you to your own blessings and burdens you with desires that may not even align with your true values. You begin to chase goals that look impressive rather than those that feel meaningful, and in doing so, you trade authenticity for approval. Psychologically, comparison corrodes self-esteem because it anchors your sense of worth to variables outside your control. You cannot dictate the talent someone is born with, the timing of their opportunities, or the breaks they catch. When your identity rests on outperforming others, your peace becomes fragile, one promotion, one purchase, or one picture away from shattering. Even when you win, the satisfaction is temporary because there is always someone higher to compare to, always a new standard that moves the goalpost further. This endless ladder has no top, it only exhausts you with climbing. The alternative is not to ignore others entirely but to reframe the gaze. Instead of using others as a mirror for judgment, use them as a window for inspiration. Let their success show you what is possible, not what is missing in you. Shift from envy to curiosity, what can I learn, rather than why not me? This change transforms comparison from a weapon against yourself into a tool for growth. Still, the most critical comparison is vertical, not horizontal, who you are today versus who you were yesterday. That is the only fair contest because it accounts for your unique starting point and your personal constraints. Progress, not position, becomes the measure of success. Gratitude is the antidote to the poison of comparison. When you deliberately count what is already present and good, you reclaim attention from the illusion of lack. Gratitude reminds you that happiness does not bloom in the abstract garden of someone else's life but in the soil of your own, tended daily. Likewise, clarity of values is a shield. When you know what truly matters to you, you are less swayed by applause for things you do not even want. Many chase wealth, status, or aesthetics because they see others rewarded for it, only to discover emptiness at the summit. Knowing your why prevents you from climbing the wrong mountain simply because others are climbing it. At its root, comparison thrives on fear, the fear of not being enough, of being invisible, of living a small life. But the truth is that worth is not a rank. It is inherent. You were never meant to live someone else's story, and they were never meant to live yours. Each life is a singular arc, with its own joys, trials, and meaning. When you measure your path by another's map, you wander from your own purpose and miss the beauty planted along your route. The day you stop competing with others and start competing with your own potential is the day you reclaim peace. Comparison kills joy because it trades presence for illusion, gratitude for envy, and self-acceptance for endless striving. It convinces you that happiness is over there, in someone else's hands, when in truth it has always been here, quiet, patient, waiting for you to notice. Change is the only constant. Change is the only constant in life, and although this phrase has been repeated so often it can sound like a cliché, it carries a profound truth about the very nature of existence. From the moment we are born until the moment we die, nothing remains exactly the same. The seasons shift, our bodies age, relationships evolve, technology advances, societies transform, and even the smallest details of our daily routines never stay fixed forever. To deny this reality is to set ourselves up for frustration, because resisting change is like trying to hold back the tide with our bare hands. Accepting that change is the fundamental law of life is not about resignation, it is about learning to live in harmony with the flow of time, embracing impermanence as both a challenge and an opportunity. One of the reasons this lesson is so important is because humans naturally crave stability and familiarity. We like the comfort of routines, the predictability of the known, the reassurance that tomorrow will look like today. These patterns give us a sense of control in an uncertain world. Yet life constantly reminds us that control is limited. Friendships shift as people grow apart or move away. Careers take unexpected turns. Health can be altered by a single diagnosis. Moments of joy or sorrow arrive without warning. Even when we think we are standing still, change is happening silently, in the cells of our bodies, in the passing of the hours, in the shifting of circumstances beyond our sight. To cling desperately to the illusion of permanence is to invite suffering, because sooner or later, reality will tear that illusion away. Yet while change can be unsettling, it is also what makes growth possible. Imagine if nothing ever changed, if you remained forever the same person you were 10 years ago. There would be no new knowledge, no maturing of character, no deepening of perspective. Change is what allows us to evolve, to adapt, to refine who we are. Painful experiences often feel unbearable in the moment, but they transform us into stronger, wiser versions of ourselves. Opportunities appear because situations shift. The end of one chapter makes room for another. If change were not constant, progress would be impossible, and life would be stagnant and dull. Seen in this light, change is not only inevitable but also essential to the beauty of existence. However, embracing this truth does not come naturally. People often fight change because it disrupts comfort zones. When a relationship ends, when a job is lost, when the future becomes uncertain, the first instinct is to resist, to hold on to what was, to grieve the loss of stability. And while grieving is natural, remaining trapped in resistance only deepens suffering. The more we cling to what is slipping away, the more painful the letting go becomes. Yet, when we lean into acceptance, when we acknowledge that impermanence is the rule rather than the exception, we begin to see transitions not as the enemy but as the terrain of life itself. This shift in perspective transforms change from something we fear into something we learn to navigate. The constancy of change also teaches humility. We are reminded that nothing is guaranteed, not success, not comfort, not even life itself. This awareness can feel sobering, but it can also awaken gratitude. Knowing that everything is temporary makes each moment more precious. The blooming of flowers in spring becomes more beautiful when we know they will fade. A conversation with a loved one becomes more meaningful when we remember that time is limited. Change strips away the illusion of permanence, but in doing so, it encourages us to live more fully in the present, to savor what is before it inevitably transforms. In a broader sense, change is what drives societies and civilizations. Cultures evolve, languages shift, governments rise and fall, technologies disrupt the old ways and create new ones. Every generation lives through transformations that reshape the way people live and think. What seems ordinary today would have been unthinkable a century ago. The truth that change is constant explains both progress and decay, both innovation and obsolescence. It challenges us to adapt, to remain flexible, to learn continuously. Those who cling too tightly to the past are often swept aside, while those who embrace change with creativity and resilience thrive. Yet, the constancy of change also brings comfort, especially in times of suffering. When you are going through pain, loss, or hardship, remembering that nothing lasts forever can bring relief. Just as moments of happiness pass, so too do moments of despair. The storms of life are not permanent, they will give way to clearer skies. This understanding can help people endure the darkest times with patience, knowing that change will eventually bring a shift, even if they cannot yet see it. It reassures us that nothing is fixed forever, not joy, but also not sorrow. What makes this lesson powerful is that it applies equally to the external world and the inner self. We are not the same person we were yesterday, even if the difference is subtle. Each experience, conversation, and thought alters us in some way. Our perspectives mature, our values shift, our priorities realign. Recognizing this fluidity helps us treat ourselves with compassion and others with understanding. Just as we are constantly changing, so are the people around us. Someone we once disliked might grow into someone we admire. Someone we admired might disappoint us. Holding on to rigid judgments ignores the reality that change is always at work in everyone. Ultimately, to live with the awareness that change is the only constant is to cultivate resilience and adaptability. It means learning to let go with grace when the time comes, to accept uncertainty as part of the journey, and to trust that transformation, though sometimes painful, is also the source of renewal. It invites us to stop wasting energy trying to freeze time or control what cannot be controlled, and instead to flow with life's rhythm. Change will arrive whether we welcome it or not, so the wisest approach is to meet it with openness, curiosity, and courage. In the end, this lesson is not meant to frighten but to liberate. It frees us from the illusion that stability is permanent, and in doing so, it teaches us to be fully alive. Life is not about clinging to what cannot last, it is about dancing with impermanence, growing with each shift, and finding peace in the ever-changing tide of existence. Experiences matter more than possessions. Experiences matter more than possessions because they shape who we are at a deeper level than anything we can own. A possession, no matter how valuable, is ultimately external. It sits outside of us, vulnerable to loss, damage, or obsolescence. A car can break down, clothes go out of style, gadgets become outdated, and houses can be taken away by circumstance. Experiences, however, embed themselves in memory and identity. They become part of our inner fabric, carried forward wherever we go, shaping the way we see the world, the stories we tell, and the connections we form with others. While possessions sit on shelves or in storage, experiences live inside us, influencing our character, perspective, and sense of meaning. One of the reasons experiences outweigh possessions is the way they engage our emotions and senses. When you travel to a new place, share laughter with friends, or learn a skill through practice, you immerse yourself in something alive and dynamic. These moments have textures and feelings attached to them, the sound of music at a concert, the scent of the ocean breeze, the nervous excitement of trying something for the first time. Possessions can give a fleeting thrill when new, but their novelty quickly fades. Experiences, on the other hand, grow richer in memory, often becoming more meaningful over time as we reflect on what they taught us and how they changed us. Experiences also connect people in ways possessions rarely can. You may admire someone's car or house, but admiration does not build deep bonds. What truly cements relationships are the shared moments, adventures taken together, struggles overcome side by side, or even simple conversations that leave lasting impressions. When people gather, they reminisce about what they have done together rather than listing the items they own. A meal shared, a trip remembered, or a challenge endured creates a story, and stories are what knit human beings together. In this way, experiences enrich not only the individual but also the social fabric, making life feel fuller and more connected. Possessions often require maintenance and protection, sometimes even creating stress. A new device or luxury item might spark pride at first, but soon it demands care, insurance, upgrades, and worry about theft or loss. The more possessions one accumulates, the heavier the burden of managing them can become. Experiences, by contrast, demand no such upkeep. They do not clutter closets or drain bank accounts after the fact. Instead, they lighten the spirit, providing joy and meaning without the weight of ownership. Even challenging experiences, while difficult at the time, often transform into sources of resilience and stories that bring perspective later on. Another reason experiences matter more is their role in shaping personal growth. Experiences stretch us, teaching lessons that cannot be learned through objects. Traveling to unfamiliar places expands cultural understanding and adaptability. Facing adversity develops resilience and patience. Learning through action, whether it is cooking, creating art, or engaging in sports, sharpens skills and builds confidence. These are qualities that form identity and character, far more enduring than any material good. A possession might symbolize status, but an experience becomes proof of lived wisdom and growth. Psychological studies support this truth. People report greater happiness from experiences than from material goods. Part of the reason is that experiences resist comparison. It is easy to compare possessions, a bigger house, a newer phone, a shinier car, and such comparisons often lead to dissatisfaction. Experiences, however, are uniquely personal. No one else can live your memories, and even if someone travels to the same place or attends the same event, their experience will never be identical to yours. This uniqueness protects experiences from the trap of constant comparison, making them a more secure source of fulfillment. Experiences also provide a sense of time well lived. Life passes quickly, and at the end of it, what most people treasure are the memories of what they did, not what they owned. Very few reflect fondly on the number of clothes in their wardrobe or the models of phones they used. What remains vivid are the people they loved, the places they saw, the challenges they overcame, and the joy they shared. Experiences give life its narrative, possessions merely decorate it. When you recall your past, it is not the chair you sat on that matters but the conversation you had while sitting there, not the brand of shoes you wore but the journey you walked in them. This does not mean possessions are meaningless. Some objects carry sentimental value precisely because they are tied to experiences. A photo album, a souvenir, or a gift may be cherished, but not for the object itself, rather, for the memory it represents. The value of the possession lies in the experience it symbolizes. This distinction underscores the lesson: what makes possessions meaningful is their connection to life lived, not their material worth. Without experiences to give them context, objects are just things, empty of real significance. At the same time, prioritizing experiences over possessions fosters freedom. When you place too much emphasis on owning, you may fall into a cycle of chasing the next acquisition, believing that happiness lies in accumulation. This pursuit often leads to debt, clutter, and a constant hunger for more. By valuing experiences instead, you break free from this cycle. You invest in living, not in collecting. You learn to find joy in moments rather than objects, in presence rather than ownership. This shift in focus creates a lighter, more flexible way of living, one less tied to material constraints and more open to adventure and growth. Ultimately, the lesson that experiences matter more than possessions is about living a life rich in meaning rather than things. It is about recognizing that fulfillment comes not from what sits in your closet or garage but from what fills your heart and memory. Experiences make us who we are, connect us to others, and leave legacies that outlast any physical object. They are the true treasures, invisible yet enduring, shaping the story of a life well lived. Forgiveness frees you. Forgiveness frees you because it undoes an ownership you never wanted, the ownership of another person's wrong over your interior life. When someone hurts you, the natural reflex is to hold on, to replay the scene, to rehearse the injury, to let the heat of it justify a permanent posture of defense. That repetition is not merely a mental habit, it is an energetic drain. Resentment tightens muscles, narrows attention, colors memory, and anchors identity to a wound. To forgive is to stop feeding that wound with fresh fuel, it is to remove the hand you have placed, again and again, into the scab. What remains is not forgetting, and not condoning the harm, but withdrawing your continual consent to let the harm define your days. At its clearest, forgiveness is a pragmatic act of self-liberation. Holding a grievance keeps the past present. It demands mental and emotional bandwidth. Thoughts that could be used for creating, loving, or working are recycled into rehearsing injustice. Letting go returns that bandwidth to you. The person you forgive may never change or even know what you did, the point is not their transformation but yours. This is why forgiveness is often described as an internal transaction, the exchange of bitterness for peace, rather than a social bargain. It is a decision to reduce the psychic tax that pain levies on your life. Forgiveness also recalibrates your relationship to identity. Many people define themselves through injuries. I am the one who was betrayed, I am the one who was abandoned. That identity offers a kind of coherence and sometimes a perverse dignity, but it is limiting. If your self-concept is anchored in victimhood, your future choices will be constrained by what that role permits. Forgiveness loosens that anchor. It allows you to be complex, wounded and whole, cautious and open, shaped by experience but not captive to it. It makes room for growth because you are no longer required, by habit, to prove the story of your pain to anyone, including yourself. Emotionally, the process of forgiving is rarely linear and rarely quick. At first it often looks like release in name only. You decide to forgive, yet old feelings surge up with surprising force. This is normal. Forgiveness is not an erasure of emotional response but a reordering of what those emotions are permitted to do. Anger, fear, and grief may still arrive, but they stop being the house the heart lives in. Over time, the frequency and intensity of those reactions diminish because the practice of forgiveness trains attention away from replay and toward repair or acceptance. That training is not weakness, it is discipline, one of the rare disciplines that increases emotional freedom rather than constricting it. A crucial distinction must be made between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness concerns your inner stance, reconciliation concerns the outer relationship. You can forgive someone and still choose to keep distance, enforce boundaries, or never re-enter the same context that allowed harm. Forgiveness does not require trust to be reinstated, it only requires that you no longer let the resentment run your life. In cases of ongoing abuse, forgiveness without safety is dangerous. True freedom comes when forgiveness is paired with wisdom about protection and dignity. The two are not opposites but partners in mature care. Self-forgiveness deserves special attention because many people live longer with internal condemnation than with any external wrong. When you forgive yourself, you stop using past mistakes as lifelong proof of inadequacy. Self-forgiveness begins with honest acknowledgement, naming what you did, feeling the regret, and then making a commitment not to live under the weight of it forever. It involves practical repair where possible, apology, making amends, changing behavior, and then a moral release, accepting that being fallible does not make you irredeemable. That release is essential for learning. Shame that persists freezes growth, while guilt that is processed can motivate restitution and improvement. The mechanics of practicing forgiveness are both simple and subtle. Start by telling the truth about what happened. Name the facts without exaggeration or minimization. Allow yourself to feel the emotions fully without performing them for others. Then, examine the story you are telling about the event. Are you retrofitting it into a larger narrative about your worth or about all people? Try retelling the event with fewer global judgments and more specific observation. The harm happened. It is not a statement about your entire being. Use perspective taking, not to excuse the offender, but to recognize complexity. People hurt others for reasons that say more about their wounds than about your value. Small practices help. Write a letter you never send, listing what you feel and what you want to release. Imagine the scene and speak forgiveness aloud to yourself, or set a ritual marker, an act of letting go, that makes the decision concrete. Therapy, spiritual counsel, or support from trusted friends can be invaluable when the damage is deep. Forgiveness also has social and moral consequences. In communities, it can break cycles of retaliation. When a harmed person forgives, especially where power and restitution have been fairly negotiated, it can open space for restorative justice and rebuilding. But forgiveness should never be coerced or romanticized as the moral obligation of the weak. It is a gift you give yourself when you are ready, not a demand placed upon the injured to preserve social harmony at personal cost. Finally, the freedom of forgiveness is practical and transformative. Freed attention lets you focus on present duties and future projects. Freed emotion allows you to engage more fully with loved ones. Freed identity permits you to take risks that previously felt impossible because you were carrying someone else's wrong like extra baggage. Forgiveness shortens the shadow the past casts on your present. It returns time you otherwise would spend ruminating and redeploys your life toward creation rather than retribution. That is why, despite the difficulty of the work, most people who choose to forgive report a lighter step, a clearer mind, and a more generous heart. In the end, forgiveness is not forgetting, it is choosing to stop being owned by harm and to use the energy of your life for growing, loving, and being fully present. Happiness is internal, not external. Happiness is internal because it is made primarily of how you relate to your experiences, not of the experiences themselves. Two people can live through the same event, win the same prize, endure the same delay, wake to the same rainy morning, and one feels grateful while the other feels cheated. The difference is not in the weather or the waiting, it's in interpretation, attention, and expectation. Your mind is not a camera that records reality, it is a lens that edits, colors, and frames it. The quality of that lens, your beliefs, values, habits of thought, determines more of your day-to-day well-being than the external scene in front of you. External things matter, but mostly as inputs. Food, shelter, safety, health, and connection form a baseline below which flourishing becomes hard. Yet once those foundations are reasonably stable, the correlation between more and happier weakens. The thrill of the new car fades into the background of ordinary errands. The promotion, after a brief lift, becomes the new normal with new pressures. This is hedonic adaptation. Your nervous system is built to acclimate so you can keep functioning rather than basking. The world keeps changing. If your joy depends on it holding still at just the right arrangement, you'll live in a perpetual state of chasing. Internal happiness comes from shifting the pursuit, from arranging the furniture of life to cultivating the one who lives in the room. Attention is the first internal lever. What you repeatedly notice grows in psychological weight. If you train your attention to scan for threats, you will find them, even on quiet days. If you train it to include small goods, the warmth of a cup, the competence in your hands, a kind message, you accumulate reasons to feel steady. Gratitude is not naive, it's counterbalancing the mind's built-in negativity bias so your view is proportionate. You do not deny pain, you refuse to let pain be the only story you tell. A second lever is interpretation. Events are facts, meanings are choices crafted from your values and narratives. A setback can be labeled, evidence I'm not enough, or tuition I pay to learn. The label you choose shapes emotion and action. You cannot always pick the facts, but you can practice picking the most truthful, useful meaning. This is the heart of resilience, not armoring yourself against life, but metabolizing it, turning adversity into wisdom instead of scar tissue. A third lever is intention, living by chosen values rather than by convenience, comparison, or impulse. External markers, likes, plaques, balances, are lagging indicators of what you do, they are not reliable guides for why you do it. When your actions match your values, you feel integrity, which reads as quiet contentment. When they don't, even praise feels hollow because you know inside it isn't quite you. Happiness built on alignment is sturdier than happiness built on applause. Internal happiness is also about relationships, but in a particular way. It's tempting to think other people make you happy. They can contribute profoundly, love softens hard days, but the enduring warmth comes from how you participate, your capacity to listen, to set boundaries, to offer generosity without keeping score, to repair after conflict. The quality of your relating rises from inner skills, empathy, humility, self-regulation, more than from finding perfect companions. Without those skills, even good partners feel wrong. With them, imperfect partnerships become deeply nourishing. Then there is the body. Your mind is housed in living tissue. Sleep, movement, and nourishment are not external trophies, they are internal conditions. A tired brain thinks in extremes, a rested brain can choose perspective. A neglected body magnifies small frustrations and blunts joy, a cared-for body makes everyday moments more available. Treating your physiology kindly is not vanity, it's respect for the instrument through which you experience meaning. Beware the three illusions that keep happiness outside of reach: the more illusion, the elsewhere illusion, and the later illusion. The more illusion promises a threshold after which you'll finally relax, one more achievement, one more purchase. The elsewhere illusion insists another city, job, or partner will fix the disquiet you carry. The later illusion delays permission to feel alive until conditions align. Internal happiness dismantles all three by practicing sufficiency now, depth here, and presence today. Paradoxically, this grounded contentment tends to improve your results because you act from clarity rather than craving. None of this means you should stop striving. Ambition is not the enemy, attachment is. You can pursue bold goals while holding your worth steady. You can care about outcomes without letting them define you. This is the difference between playing to express your best versus playing to prove you are enough. The first breeds joy in the doing, the second breeds anxiety in the waiting. When you invest your identity in controllable inputs, effort, learning, kindness, you remain sovereign over your mood. When you stake it in uncontrollable outputs, approval, luck, timing, you outsource your peace. Practices make the internal stance reliable. A few minutes of stillness each day trains attention to notice thoughts without being owned by them. Writing down 3 specifics you appreciate trains the interpretive muscle toward balance. Asking, "What's the smallest kind thing I can do now?" shifts you from rumination to contribution. Setting one boundary where you've been saying yes resentfully replaces quiet resentment with honest respect. Choosing one meaningful action before consumption, create before you scroll, anchors the day in agency. Small, repeated acts are how internal wealth compounds. There will be grief, illness, unfairness, real storms that overwhelm any technique. Internal happiness does not forbid sorrow, it holds it with compassion and refuses to convert pain into bitterness. It lets joy and grief coexist, because a full heart has room for both. The point is not constant cheerfulness, it is inner spaciousness, a trust that you can meet what comes without collapsing into it. Eventually you see that external achievements are best treated as celebrations, not foundations. They are wonderful when they happen and survivable when they don't. The foundation is the cultivated place inside that knows how to attend, interpret, intend, and care. From there, the world can be enjoyed without being worshipped. You stop bargaining with life. If I get X, I'll allow myself to be happy, and start practicing happiness as a way of walking, attentive to goodness, honest about hardship, aligned with your values, generous with your presence. The circumstances will rise and fall, the inner posture remains. That is why happiness, at its most durable, is not something you chase out there but something you practice in here. Health is wealth. Health is the foundation upon which every aspect of life is built, yet it is often the most overlooked asset. Without health, wealth loses its luster, success feels hollow, and even the simplest joys become burdensome. People chase money, status, and possessions with relentless energy, believing these things will bring happiness, yet they often do so at the expense of their own well-being. They sacrifice sleep for productivity, trade balanced meals for convenience, and neglect exercise because they are too busy. In the short term, this seems manageable. But in the long term, the cost becomes painfully clear. Poor health robs you of the ability to enjoy what you worked so hard to achieve. Imagine having all the wealth in the world but being too sick to travel, too weak to play with your children, or too burdened by pain to enjoy a meal. Money can buy comfort, treatments, and temporary relief, but it cannot buy vitality. It cannot restore the energy you once had or reverse years of neglect. The truth is simple: health is the currency that allows you to experience life fully. When your body is strong and your mind is clear, everything else becomes more meaningful. You can work with focus, build relationships with joy, and pursue passions without limitation. But when health fails, even the smallest tasks feel overwhelming. A short walk feels like a mountain. A simple meal feels like a challenge. Life shrinks, and so does your happiness. Health is wealth because it underpins productivity and longevity. No matter how ambitious you are, your success depends on your physical and mental capacity to perform. If you are constantly fatigued, ill, or mentally drained, you cannot function at your best. Good health amplifies your potential. It gives you the stamina to chase opportunities, the resilience to overcome challenges, and the clarity to make sound decisions. On the other hand, poor health is a silent thief. It steals time, energy, and even money. Medical bills pile up, work days are lost, and dreams are postponed indefinitely. In many ways, neglecting health is the most expensive mistake you can make because its cost multiplies over time. What makes this lesson profound is that health often goes unnoticed when you have it. You rarely appreciate the ability to breathe freely, walk without pain, or sleep peacefully, until those abilities are compromised. People take health for granted because its decline is gradual, like a leaking roof that shows no signs until the storm comes. By the time serious illness strikes, prevention is no longer an option, only management remains. This is why health requires proactive care, balanced nutrition, regular exercise, adequate sleep, stress management, and routine checkups. These habits are investments, and like financial investments, their returns compound over time. Every workout adds a layer of strength. Every nutritious meal builds resilience. Every night of proper rest restores your mental clarity. Over years, these small actions create a fortress of well-being that protects you from the storms of life. The mind is as important as the body. Mental health influences how you think, feel, and act. You can be physically strong but mentally burdened by anxiety, depression, or burnout, and this can paralyze your ability to live fully. Prioritizing mental wellness, through mindfulness, meaningful connections, and self-care, is not a luxury, it is a necessity. A healthy mind allows you to enjoy a healthy body, and together they form the ultimate wealth, the capacity to experience life with energy, clarity, and peace. At the end of life, people rarely wish they had earned more money, they wish they had taken better care of themselves so they could have lived longer and better. They wish for more time with loved ones, more strength to travel, more energy to pursue passions. This truth is echoed in hospitals and nursing homes across the world. The richest person in the room is not the one with the largest bank account, but the one with the ability to stand, breathe, smile, and live without pain. That is why health is wealth, not metaphorically, but literally. It is the resource that determines the quality of every other resource you have. Without it, life becomes survival, not living. With it, even simple things, like walking in the park, sharing a meal, or laughing with friends, become treasures beyond measure. Jealousy is wasted energy. Jealousy is wasted energy because it takes the limited resources of your mind and heart and funnels them into resentment instead of growth. When you feel jealous, you are directing attention toward what someone else has or who they are, rather than focusing on your own path. It becomes a kind of fixation, an internal comparison that drains motivation and peace. Instead of fueling action, jealousy corrodes it. It does not build, it does not create, it does not move you forward. It lingers, eats at self-esteem, and traps you in a cycle where the more you look outward at what others possess, the less energy you have to cultivate your own potential. Jealousy often arises from comparison, from measuring your worth against someone else's accomplishments, relationships, or possessions. But comparison itself is a flawed foundation because every life unfolds under different conditions. The person you envy has a background, a set of choices, opportunities, and struggles you cannot see fully. Their success might look effortless, but beneath it are sacrifices, pains, and failures hidden from view. By fixating on the polished surface, jealousy convinces you that life is unfair and that you have been deprived. This mindset steals the time and attention that could be invested into developing your own abilities, pursuing your own dreams, or enjoying what you already have. Every ounce of energy poured into jealousy is energy not available for gratitude, effort, and self-improvement. The destructive part of jealousy is that it does not stop at mere thought, it reshapes perception. When you are jealous, you filter reality through a lens that exaggerates another's strengths and minimizes your own. Someone else's gain feels like your loss, even though life is not a zero-sum game. Success, love, happiness, and creativity are not limited resources. One person's achievement does not diminish your potential. Yet jealousy tricks the mind into believing that there is only so much good to go around, and that someone else's blessing has robbed you of your chance. Living with this illusion makes you bitter instead of inspired. It builds barriers between you and others, as jealousy often turns into gossip, criticism, or silent resentment. In the end, it poisons relationships and isolates you, when the very connection you might build could have been a source of learning and support. Another reason jealousy is wasted energy is that it focuses on what you cannot control. You cannot control someone else's fortune, looks, talents, or circumstances. You cannot reverse time or place yourself into another's life. Obsessing over these external realities is futile because they are beyond your reach. What you can control, however, is your response, the effort you put in, the way you use your time, and the values you live by. By investing in jealousy, you essentially double down on powerlessness, wishing things were different instead of acting to make your own life richer. The more you stew in envy, the less you act with intention, and the gap between you and your aspirations widens. It is like standing at the bottom of a staircase, staring at someone already near the top, and instead of climbing, you waste time resenting their progress. Ironically, jealousy often masks admiration. You rarely feel envious of people who have what you do not want. Jealousy usually points to qualities or achievements that matter deeply to you. If someone's creativity, confidence, or discipline triggers envy, it might be because you secretly yearn for those traits in yourself. This is where jealousy, if observed carefully, can become a teacher. Rather than letting it consume your energy, you can use it as a compass, a signal pointing toward areas where you desire growth. By turning envy into curiosity, asking what you admire about this person, what lessons you can learn from their journey, you reclaim the wasted energy and redirect it into motivation. The difference lies in whether you stew in bitterness or transform the feeling into action. On a deeper level, jealousy undermines gratitude. It blinds you to the abundance already present in your life. You may have love, health, opportunities, or talents that others would treasure, but when jealousy takes over, you forget to see them. You discount your blessings because you are too busy counting someone else's. Gratitude and jealousy cannot coexist for long, one will starve the other. If you nourish gratitude, jealousy loses its grip. But if you feed jealousy, gratitude withers. This is why jealousy is so costly. It not only wastes energy but also robs you of joy in the present moment. Living free from jealousy requires a shift in perspective. You begin to recognize that life is not a competition but a journey unique to each person. The success of others does not diminish your own potential, it can even inspire it. When you let go of jealousy, you make space for admiration, collaboration, and authenticity. You can celebrate others without feeling threatened, and in doing so, you liberate yourself from the draining cycle of comparison. The energy that once went into resentment now goes into growth, creativity, and fulfillment. At the end of the day, jealousy is wasted because it leads nowhere. It does not build your character, deepen your skills, or enrich your relationships. It only depletes, distracts, and corrodes. The moment you stop feeding it, you reclaim your power. You begin to channel your energy into actions that actually matter, developing yourself, appreciating what you have, and striving toward what you want. The life lesson is clear: every drop of energy poured into envy is energy stolen from your own potential, while every drop invested in growth is a step closer to the life you desire. Life is unfair, but you still have choices. Life is unfair, and saying that aloud does not weaken you, it simply names a reality that most of us spend our lives trying to evade. People are born into different circumstances, some inherit advantage and others inherit struggle, illnesses strike at random, institutions fail some and protect others, accidents and injustices happen without warning. Part of the human condition is that events do not distribute themselves according to merit, effort, or moral worth. Accepting that truth is not a surrender to cynicism but the first step toward clarity. Once you stop pretending the world is perfectly just, you can see the space where choices actually exist and act from there. Acknowledging unfairness also frees you from a false moral accounting that many of us carry, the idea that if we just try hard enough, everything will be fair. That belief can turn disappointment into self-blame. When things go wrong, we are tempted to ask, "What did I do to deserve this?" rather than, "What can I do next?" Recognizing that randomness and structural forces play a role gives you permission to experience legitimate emotions, anger, grief, confusion, without turning them into shame. Those feelings are not indicators of failure, they are signals that something matters to you and that an honest appraisal is required. You can grieve what was lost, register that the situation is unjust, and still begin to take small, deliberate steps forward. Within the landscape of unfairness, choices remain. The most immediate choice is how you respond inwardly. You can allow bitterness and helplessness to calcify into a story that defines your whole life, or you can choose an orientation that preserves energy for action. That choice is not about denying pain, it is about managing attention. When unfairness consumes every corner of your mind, you lose the bandwidth to plan, to learn, and to build. When you set limits around rumination, by practicing focused reflection, seeking therapy, or leaning on trusted friends, you create the mental space to identify the levers you can actually pull. This internal regulation is not trivial, it determines how effectively you will use the external choices available to you. Another choice concerns the attitude you take toward agency. Even when systems or circumstances are stacked against you, there are often small domains where your influence matters. You can choose to cultivate skills, to build relationships, to protect your health, to manage your money prudently, or to set boundaries that preserve your dignity. These actions do not magically erase structural inequities, but they do change probabilities. A modest, consistent investment, learning a trade, finishing a certification, forming alliances, can open doors that once seemed closed. Choosing to act in the narrow spaces you control compounds over time and creates options where there were none before. There is also the ethical choice about how to use your energy, whether to fight, to adapt, or to rebuild. Sometimes the right response to unfairness is resistance, organizing, advocating for change, calling out injustice, or helping those more vulnerable than yourself. Other times, the smarter response is to redirect, finding a different path that avoids an abusive institution or a toxic environment. And sometimes the work is reconstructive, creating new communities, businesses, or practices that replace what failed you. Wisdom lies in discerning which strategy fits the situation. Fighting every injustice is noble but exhausting. Adapting without pushing for reform can feel like betrayal. A balanced life includes both protest and pragmatism, because both are necessary parts of long-term change. Choosing whom to trust and whom to partner with is another critical decision in an unfair world. Relationships are conduits for opportunities, support, and perspective. Surrounding yourself with people who recognize systemic unfairness but do not let it paralyze them can be transformative. Mentors, peers, and allies can offer skills, introductions, and moral support that multiply your effectiveness. At the same time, choosing to walk away from people or institutions that exploit or demean you is itself an act of agency. No one owes you an easy path, but you owe yourself the dignity of setting limits where necessary. Self-compassion is a choice often overlooked when confronting unfairness. It is easy to internalize external wrongs as personal deficiencies. Instead, choosing to treat yourself with kindness, acknowledging pain without catastrophizing, giving yourself permission to rest, seeking professional help when needed, preserves your capacity to act. Self-compassion does not give you license to avoid responsibility, rather, it strengthens you to take responsibility where it truly matters. Choosing optimism is not naive when it is paired with realism. You can hold a clear-eyed view of injustice and still choose hope as a practical stance. Hope motivates planning, risk-taking, and perseverance. It is what allows people to keep rebuilding after loss and to persist long enough for incremental improvements to accumulate. Hope does not guarantee outcomes, but it does improve the odds that effort will be sustained. Finally, there is the moral choice to translate personal adversity into broader empathy and action. Those who have experienced unfairness often develop a keener sensitivity to other people's suffering. That sensitivity can be burdensome, but it is also a source of moral power. Choosing to help others, to mentor, to volunteer, or to advocate contributes to a small but vital countercurrent against injustice. The world will not become perfectly fair overnight, but these acts create pockets of justice and dignity that matter to real people. Saying, "Life is unfair," without adding, "but you still have choices," makes the phrase a complaint. Adding choices makes it a strategy. The honesty about unfairness saves you from illusions that only increase suffering. The emphasis on choice renews agency where agency is possible. Together they form a posture that is neither resigned nor deluded. You carry both the ache of what is unjust and the practical determination to do what you can next. That posture is not a guarantee of victory, but it is a way to keep moving, to preserve integrity, and to build meaning out of conditions that never promised you fairness in the first place. Silence is powerful. Silence is powerful because it creates space where words cannot reach, a space where meaning deepens and perception sharpens. In a world addicted to noise, Endless conversation, notifications, constant commentary, silence seems like absence, as if something is missing. But silence is not empty, it is full of potential. It is the pause that gives shape to sound, the breath that makes speech possible, the stillness that lets understanding take root. Without silence, words lose their weight. Without silence, thoughts scatter. Silence is the canvas on which clarity is drawn. One of the greatest powers of silence lies in its ability to sharpen listening. Most people do not truly listen, they wait for their turn to speak, formulating responses while words are still being said. Silence interrupts this pattern. When you choose not to fill every gap with your voice, you give space for others to reveal themselves fully. You hear what is said and what is unsaid, the tremor in the tone, the hesitation before a confession, the emotions that live between syllables. This depth of listening fosters trust because people feel safe in the presence of someone who does not rush to dominate the air. In this way, silence becomes a gift, an act of generosity that says, "Your words matter, your presence is enough." Silence also protects wisdom. In moments of conflict or provocation, the instinct is to speak quickly, to defend, to retaliate. Words spoken in haste often become weapons you later regret. Silence interrupts the reflex. It gives time for emotion to cool and reason to return. A measured response, sometimes no response, preserves dignity and diffuses escalation. Leaders throughout history have understood this. A pause before answering conveys thoughtfulness, self-control, and authority. The one who can remain silent when others clamor often holds the strongest position, not because they lack opinion, but because they refuse to squander their power on noise. Internally, silence is equally transformative. The mind is a restless instrument, producing a constant stream of thoughts, judgments, and plans. When you never step outside that stream, you become its captive. Silence breaks the current. It invites awareness to widen, to notice not just thoughts but the space in which they arise. This is why silence is central to meditation, prayer, and creative work. It opens a channel to something deeper than the chatter of the mind. In silence, insights emerge unforced. Ideas that eluded you in noise come into focus. Emotions that seemed overwhelming settle into something comprehensible. Silence is not a void, it is a well. In relationships, silence communicates in ways speech cannot. There are moments when words are inadequate, when grief is raw, when joy overflows, when awe renders language clumsy. A shared silence in such moments is not awkward, it is sacred. It says, "I am here with you, and nothing more is needed." Lovers know this. Friends who have grown old together know this. Silence, in its purest form, is intimacy without performance. It allows two beings to exist side by side without the pressure to fill the air, trusting that presence speaks louder than any sentence. Silence is powerful in strategy as well. Negotiators use it to create pressure, teachers use it to provoke thought, artists use it to create rhythm. In music, silence is not the absence of sound but an essential note, a rest that gives shape to melody. In speech, a pause can carry more weight than a paragraph, forcing the listener to lean in, to anticipate, to reflect. Great orators understand this, they let silence punctuate their words, making meaning resonate long after the sound fades. The right silence at the right moment is not emptiness, it is emphasis. Yet silence is difficult in modern life because it confronts us with ourselves. Noise distracts us from our inner landscape, the unresolved emotions, the unasked questions, the truths we avoid. When you sit in silence, you meet those things without armor. That can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. But within that discomfort lies growth. Only when you stop drowning in external sound can you hear the quiet signals of intuition. The gentle tug of purpose, the subtle wisdom that noise buries. The voices that matter most, your own inner voice and, for many, the voice of the divine, speak softly. Silence is the condition for hearing them. Silence does not mean passivity. It is not the absence of engagement but the presence of control. It is the art of choosing when speech serves and when it diminishes. Not every thought deserves expression. Not every argument deserves an answer. The discipline of silence, knowing when to hold your tongue, is a mark of strength, not weakness. A person who cannot stop talking is like a river that never settles, muddy and loud. A person who can embrace silence is like a deep lake, still, clear, reflecting everything without distortion. In a culture that prizes volume, shouting opinions, constant posting, endless commentary, silence becomes radical. It is an act of resistance against the tyranny of noise. It says, I will not compete in this race of voices. I will create space to think, to feel, to truly connect. Silence gives you back sovereignty over your attention, which is the most precious resource you own. It is the ground of clarity, of creativity, of calm strength. Those who master silence do not vanish, they radiate. Their words, when finally spoken, carry weight because they were not squandered. Their presence commands respect because it is rooted in stillness. In the end, silence is powerful not because it hides truth, but because it holds truth gently until the right moment to speak, or until speech is unnecessary. It is the pause that makes the music. The breath that steadies the voice. The empty space that turns chaos into order. It is strength without noise, influence without force, depth without display. To embrace silence is to claim a kind of power that noise will never know, the power to listen, to understand, to choose, and to simply be. Simplicity leads to clarity. Simplicity leads to clarity because complexity clouds perception, while simplicity strips away the unnecessary so that the essential can emerge. In every area of life, thought, communication, work, relationships, clutter creates confusion. When you overload your mind with excessive information, your home with needless possessions, or your schedule with endless obligations, you create noise that drowns out what truly matters. Simplicity is not about deprivation, it is about refinement. It is the deliberate act of removing what does not serve your purpose so that what does can shine without distraction. Clarity is the ability to see things as they are without distortion. Yet the human tendency is to complicate. We collect objects we do not need, chase goals that do not align with our values, and fill conversations with words that add volume but not meaning. Each layer of excess becomes a fog over the truth. Consider decision-making. When options multiply unnecessarily, you experience decision fatigue, second-guessing, and paralysis. A clear decision rarely comes from having more choices, it comes from having the right ones. Simplicity reduces choices to essentials, making the path forward visible and achievable. In thought, simplicity is intellectual honesty. Complex arguments, ornate words, and convoluted reasoning often hide uncertainty or insecurity. The mind that seeks clarity seeks simplicity. What is the core truth? What is the one principle that explains the rest? Philosophers, scientists, and leaders throughout history have understood this. Einstein famously valued simplicity, not oversimplification, but elegance, removing the non-essential until only truth remains. When you simplify your thinking, you not only understand better, you communicate better. A complex message loses people, a simple message moves them. Brevity with depth is power. In life, simplicity restores energy. Every object you own, every commitment you make, every open browser tab in your mind imposes a cognitive load. The brain is not wired for endless clutter, it seeks patterns, order, and coherence. Clutter disrupts those patterns and creates stress, often silently. When your environment is messy, your focus fragments. When your schedule is overstuffed, your priorities blur. Simplifying your surroundings and routines is not an aesthetic luxury, it is a psychological necessity for clear thinking. That is why minimalism resonates with so many. It is not about living with nothing, but about living without what burdens you. Relationships, too, benefit from simplicity. Misunderstandings multiply when communication is tangled in assumptions, half-truths, and unnecessary drama. Speaking plainly, without pretension, without hidden agendas, creates trust. Love becomes clearer when stripped of games and expectations. The simplest gestures, presence, listening, kindness, carry more weight than extravagant displays. Complexity in relationships often signals ego, the need to impress, to control, to win. Simplicity signals authenticity, the willingness to show up as you are and value others as they are. Even creativity thrives on simplicity. Great design, great writing, great art, these achieve impact not through excess but through restraint. A good artist removes every stroke that does not add meaning. A good writer cuts every word that does not serve the sentence. Simplicity demands discipline because it is easier to add than to subtract. Anyone can make something complicated, only mastery makes it simple without making it empty. The same principle applies to problem solving. The best solutions are rarely the most elaborate, they are the most elegant, the ones that resolve the issue with the fewest steps and the least waste. Simplicity is also freedom. When you live with fewer distractions, you are less controlled by them. Consumer culture teaches that happiness comes from accumulation, more things, more choices, more status. But often, the more you own, the more you are owned. Each possession requires space, maintenance, and attention. Each extra activity requires time and energy. Complexity disguises itself as abundance, but it often leads to exhaustion. Simplicity does the opposite, it gives you back control. It focuses your attention on what matters most, creating mental and emotional space for meaning. Achieving simplicity is not passive, it requires active discernment. It asks, what is essential here? What adds value? What aligns with my purpose? Everything else becomes noise to eliminate. This discipline can be uncomfortable because we are conditioned to equate more with better. Letting go of excess, whether it is physical clutter, social obligations, or mental baggage, feels at first like loss. But what you lose is distraction, what you gain is clarity, peace, and direction. In that spaciousness, you can finally see what was always there, the essence. Simplicity leads to clarity because it turns the blur of chaos into the sharpness of focus. It is not the enemy of richness but the doorway to it. When you stop drowning in the unnecessary, you begin to breathe in what truly matters, purpose over noise, meaning over decoration, truth over illusion. A simple life is not a lesser life, it is a life in which every element has weight, every action has intention, and every thought serves understanding. Complexity may impress for a moment, but simplicity endures, because in simplicity, you find not emptiness but the concentrated force of what is real. Small habits create big results. Small habits create big results because life is less a series of dramatic, once-off leaps than a slow accumulation of tiny choices. Each small action is like a single coin dropped into a jar. By itself it seems negligible, but repeated day after day those coins add up into something substantial. The real power of small habits is not that any one of them is transformational, but that they compound. A 5-minute walk today, a page of reading tonight, a single minute of deliberate breathing in the morning, none of these feels like much in isolation. Taken together over weeks, months, years, they reshape muscle, mind, and circumstance until the difference between who you were and who you are becomes unmistakable. At a practical level, small habits work because they bypass the psychological friction that enormous goals create. Big ambitions are thrilling to imagine but heavy to start. They trigger fear, perfectionism, and an internal cost-benefit calculation. Is this worth the effort? Small habits, in contrast, are easy to begin and therefore easy to repeat. the barrier to entry is low, so the brain doesn't mount a full-scale rebellion. That's how momentum starts. When you do something simple consistently, you build a streak, and streaks produce identity. When you show up for a single push-up every morning for a month, you start to think of yourself as someone who exercises. Identity change is the invisible engine behind sustained behavior change. Tiny actions are the nuts and bolts that turn it. There is also a mathematical truth underneath the intuition: compounding. Improvements compound when repeated because each repetition changes the baseline slightly. Read 1 page a day and you will have read 365 pages in a year, a whole book's worth. Learn a single new word every day and you'll master over 365 new words in a year. These increments are multiplicative when layered. Small improvements in health improve sleep, which makes work more productive, which reduces stress, which increases discipline, which makes better choices easier, a cascade that is hard to trigger with a single heroic effort and easy to sabotage when relying on willpower alone. The psychology of habit formation explains why the tiny wins are sticky. Habits follow a loop: cue, routine, reward. Small habits require a smaller reward to feel worth repeating. They also take less time and less grit, so they circumvent decision fatigue. Making the environment friendlier to the habit, putting running shoes by the bed, keeping a book on the nightstand, making a spoonful of vegetables a default at dinner, turns cues into automatic triggers. Habit stacking, where a new tiny habit is attached to an existing routine, leverages the brain's existing circuits to support change. The approach makes good behavior the path of least resistance instead of a daily moral struggle. But small habits are not just about ease, they are about design. The most effective tiny habits are chosen with the future in mind. They are specific, measurable, and anchored in context. Practice the guitar is a vague directive. Play 1 chord after brushing my teeth is precise and implementable. The design also pays attention to feedback. Small habits that produce immediate, visible rewards are more likely to stick. That's why tracking works. Crossing off a calendar or checking a box gives a small jolt of satisfaction that reinforces the behavior. Over time, that satisfaction becomes internalized. The habit no longer needs the external check mark because it has become part of a person's rhythm. There is a moral simplicity to working in small increments. When the world seems to demand instant success or overnight reinvention, a strategy of tiny improvements offers a quieter, more humane alternative. It reduces shame and self-reproach because failing to do one small thing is less catastrophic than failing to overhaul everything. It invites experimentation: tweak the habit, shift the cue, reduce the friction, and try again. Resilience grows because the cost of restarting is low. You don't need to feel like a failure if you miss a day, you only need to begin again tomorrow. Over months, those restarts themselves contribute to the learning that produces mastery. Examples make the principle tangible. Consider saving money. Putting aside a small percentage of each paycheck might seem trivial, but with compound interest and steady additions, it becomes financial security. Consider learning. 10 minutes of deliberate practice each day on an instrument or language becomes fluency over several years. Consider health. Swapping one daily sugary snack for a piece of fruit gradually reduces cravings, improves blood sugar regulation, and nudges the taste buds toward whole foods. In business, small continuous improvements in a process, shaving seconds off a task, slightly improving a product feature, accumulate to produce large gains in efficiency, quality, and customer satisfaction. Small habits also have a dark flip side. Tiny bad choices compound negatively. Habitually scrolling social media for 5 extra minutes before bed erodes sleep and attention in precisely the same compounding way. The same mechanism that allows positive habits to snowball allows negative ones to calcify. This is important because it reframes responsibility. You don't have to make one huge, heroic change to transform your life, but you do need to be mindful of the little decisions that, unchecked, will steer you off course. To convert the idea into practice, begin with micro-commitments. Pick one behavior you want to cultivate and make it so tiny that it feels almost trivial to do. Tie it to an existing routine. Make the environment supportive, remove obstacles, make the desired action obvious and convenient. Celebrate small wins immediately. Track progress publicly if that helps accountability. After the habit is established, gradually scale it. Tiny is the doorway, expansion comes once the behavioral architecture is secure. Expect setbacks and treat them as information rather than indictment. The goal is not perfection, it is consistent directionality. Finally, be patient. Results from small habits are often invisible at first because the initial steps are preparing foundations, shifting baselines, and enabling future leaps. The visible change appears once the accumulation reaches a tipping point. That lag can be discouraging, but it is also the true wonder of incremental work. When it finally surfaces, the transformation feels authentic and resilient because it is built on 1,000 small acts rather than a single feat of will. In the end, the lesson is both liberating and empowering. You don't need a grand overhaul to change your life. You need a sequence of thoughtful, tiny, well-designed acts that, repeated without drama, add up to remarkable outcomes. Small habits don't promise instant glory, but they promise something better, sustainable change, less suffering, and the quiet satisfaction of becoming, day by deliberate day, someone who lives in alignment with their deepest intentions. The world owes you nothing. The world owes you nothing because existence itself is not a contract that guarantees comfort, fairness, or success simply for being alive. Many people grow up with an unconscious belief that life should reward them for their intentions, their effort, or even their struggles. They imagine that because they are good, hardworking, or decent, opportunities will naturally appear and happiness will follow. But life does not work on promises, it works on principles. It operates under cause and effect, not entitlement. You can influence outcomes through choices and actions, but you cannot demand them as a birthright. Believing the world owes you something creates a dangerous mindset, a sense of entitlement that breeds frustration and bitterness when reality does not conform to your expectations. You start to see life as unfair, as if it has personally wronged you, when in truth life is indifferent. It does not hand out justice on a silver platter, it reflects back what you consistently do. Talent, effort, and virtue are not tickets to guaranteed success, they are conditions that increase your probability of it. The difference is subtle but crucial. The world does not owe you success because you worked hard, but hard work increases the likelihood that you will succeed. This lesson matters because waiting for what you think you deserve robs you of agency. If you believe the world owes you a good job, financial security, or respect, you will spend your life disappointed and passive, wondering why those things have not shown up. But when you accept that nothing is owed, you shift from expectation to responsibility. You stop asking, "Why isn't the world giving me what I deserve?" and start asking, "What can I create, build, or change to get closer to what I want?" That shift is where freedom lives, because you no longer outsource your destiny to forces you cannot control. The truth is that fairness, as humans define it, does not exist in nature. Some people are born into privilege, others into hardship. Some encounter opportunities by chance, others face obstacles from day one. You do not choose the starting line. But what you choose, always, is whether you stay stuck in resentment or move forward with what you have. Life does not guarantee equal outcomes, only the possibility of effort. The belief that the world owes you something because you had a hard beginning adds weight to your struggle instead of lightening it. It locks you in comparison, in anger, in stagnation. The people who rise above disadvantage do so because they abandon entitlement and embrace responsibility. The world owes me nothing, so I owe it to myself to fight for what I want. Entitlement is seductive because it feels comforting. It tells you that the problem is external, not internal. It allows you to blame the system, other people, or fate instead of examining your own habits, decisions, and mindset. But blaming does not build. Complaining does not create. Waiting for life to be fair does not make it fair. The moment you understand that nothing is owed, you stop wasting energy on resentment and redirect it toward action. That is not cynicism, it is empowerment. It means recognizing that while you cannot control everything, you control more than you think. This principle applies everywhere: work, relationships, health. In work, no one owes you a promotion because you've been at a company for 10 years. Growth is earned by staying relevant, adding value, and solving problems. In relationships, no one owes you love or loyalty simply because you love them. Healthy connections are nurtured through mutual respect and effort. Even your body owes you nothing beyond what you maintain. If you neglect health, it will fail regardless of how unfair that feels. Life responds to behavior, not entitlement. Accepting this truth is not harsh, it is liberating. It removes illusions and gives you clarity. You stop waiting for perfect conditions or external rescue. You stop assuming that luck will balance out. Instead, you become proactive, resourceful, resilient. You learn to play the cards you were dealt instead of resenting the dealer. You start to appreciate what you have instead of obsessing over what you think you deserve. Gratitude replaces entitlement because you realize that everything, every opportunity, every act of kindness, is a gift, not a debt life is paying back. Paradoxically, when you stop expecting the world to owe you, life often feels more generous. Why? Because you approach it without the bitterness of unmet expectations. You notice opportunities instead of dismissing them as insufficient. You take risks because you are not waiting for certainty. You build skills because you know no one is coming to hand you success. This mindset does not guarantee an easy life, but it guarantees a stronger one, a life where progress depends on your persistence, adaptability, and will. The world owes you nothing, and that is not something to resent, it is something to embrace. It means your future is not predetermined by promises, it is open, waiting for what you create. It means you do not need to beg for fairness because you can build your own advantage. It means that every achievement you earn is truly yours, not something handed to you by fate. When you release the illusion of entitlement, you stop being a victim of life and start being an author of it. And that is far more powerful than anything the world could ever owe you. You can't pour from an empty cup. The saying that you cannot pour from an empty cup is deceptively simple, yet it captures a deep truth about the human condition and the way we give and receive in life. At its heart, it reminds us that all giving, whether it is in the form of love, energy, patience, wisdom, or material support, must originate from something that already exists within us. A cup that has been drained cannot offer water to anyone, no matter how strong the desire or intention might be. In the same way, a person who has neglected their own well-being cannot endlessly offer care, compassion, or energy to others without eventually collapsing under the weight of emptiness. So often in life, people are encouraged to give, to sacrifice, to put others before themselves, and while there is beauty and nobility in selflessness, there is also danger when it is taken to the extreme. Many people exhaust themselves in pursuit of being endlessly available to others, whether as parents, friends, leaders, colleagues, or caregivers. They run from one responsibility to the next, always showing up, always saying yes, always trying to provide. On the surface, this looks admirable, but beneath it lies an erosion of inner strength. Each act of giving takes something from their reserves, and if there is no effort to refill those reserves, what once was generosity transforms into exhaustion. This is when people begin to feel burnt out, resentful, or even detached from the very people they sought to help. The lesson of the empty cup points to the necessity of self-care, not as an act of selfish indulgence, but as an act of preservation and sustainability. Just as no one criticizes a gardener for watering their plants before they bloom, no one should criticize a person for nurturing themselves before they give. In fact, caring for oneself is the only way to ensure that the giving can continue with authenticity and energy. If you deprive yourself of rest, joy, nourishment, or reflection, your ability to give meaningfully diminishes over time. You might still show up physically, but the quality of your presence suffers. You may be there in body but not in spirit, offering fragments instead of fullness. A well-filled cup represents a person who has tended to their physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. It is someone who has allowed themselves to rest when tired, to seek solitude when overwhelmed, to enjoy joy when it calls, and to nurture their health and growth consistently. From this fullness comes a kind of giving that is effortless and radiant. When your cup is full, sharing does not feel like a sacrifice. It feels like an overflow. Others feel nourished by your presence because you are giving from a place of abundance rather than depletion. There is a noticeable difference between the kindness offered by someone who is exhausted and the kindness offered by someone who feels whole. One carries strain, the other carries vitality. The idea also teaches us about balance and limits. We live in a culture that often glorifies endless productivity, constant availability, and tireless effort. People are praised for working long hours, for never taking breaks, for putting others first at all costs. But beneath this surface praise lies an unsustainable pattern. Even the strongest person has limits. To ignore those limits is to court collapse. The empty cup metaphor is a warning against this illusion of infinite giving. It is a reminder that to give well, one must know when to stop, when to rest, and when to replenish. Without that pause, without that renewal, every act of giving becomes less effective, until nothing meaningful remains. Another layer of this wisdom is the recognition that taking care of oneself is not only for one's own benefit, but also for the benefit of others. A parent who never rests, never nurtures their own joy, eventually becomes irritable or detached, even if they continue to meet their children's physical needs. A leader who never reflects or rejuvenates makes poorer decisions, even if they still try to guide their team. A friend who constantly gives without tending to themselves may eventually pull away, feeling unappreciated or drained. In each of these cases, neglecting one's own well-being harms the very people they hope to help. Filling your own cup is, therefore, not selfishness, it is the most generous thing you can do. It ensures that when you give, your giving is real, whole, and enduring. This lesson also has spiritual and emotional dimensions. An empty cup can symbolize a person whose spirit has gone dry, whose sense of meaning or joy has faded under constant demands. When this happens, even if the person continues to act generously, what they offer may lack warmth, passion, or sincerity. Conversely, someone who makes space for reflection, gratitude, creativity, or faith refills not only their energy but also their spirit. They reconnect to purpose, and that purpose infuses everything they give with greater richness. It is not simply about rest or leisure, it is about nourishing the soul so that what you offer is infused with depth and authenticity. The metaphor also encourages mindfulness in relationships. When people give to each other, they must also remember to receive. A one-sided flow depletes, but a reciprocal exchange sustains. Learning to accept help, love, and care from others is one way to refill your cup. Just as you cannot live on giving alone, you also cannot live on receiving alone. The rhythm of life is a balance between the two. Those who resist receiving often find themselves more quickly depleted because they have shut off one of the most natural ways of replenishment. Recognizing that you, too, deserve care is a critical part of keeping your cup full. Ultimately, the teaching that you cannot pour from an empty cup is about recognizing the human need for renewal. It is about understanding that to be your best self, for yourself and for others, you must treat yourself as worthy of care. It reminds us that the quality of what we give is directly linked to the quality of what we nurture within ourselves. A full cup spills over naturally, joyfully, and abundantly, while an empty cup struggles, strains, and eventually breaks. To live wisely is to keep your cup replenished, so that what you pour into the world is not forced, but flowing, not depleting, but life-giving. You don't have to respond to everything. There is a quiet power in the idea that you don't have to respond to everything. We live in a world engineered for instantaneous reaction. Phones buzz, inboxes swell, social feeds demand quick takes, and our reflex is to answer, to correct, to defend, to like, to explain. But responding to every ping, every slight, every request is a kind of surrender of attention and sovereignty. It spreads you thin, creates emotional reactivity, and trains other people to expect your constant availability. Choosing not to respond, deliberately and thoughtfully, is not avoidance so much as curation. It is deciding what deserves your time, energy, and voice. The impulse to respond is natural and has roots in basic social wiring. We are hardwired for reciprocity and social belonging. Silence can feel dangerous because it might mean rejection or conflict. Social media amplifies this by rewarding immediate engagement, comments, replies, and sharing, so that silence feels like missed opportunity or loss of face. There is also the fear of ambiguity. Unanswered messages can make us anxious, so we fire off something, anything, to fill the gap. But these reflex answers are rarely the best answers. They are hurried, emotionally loaded, and often leave more to clean up later. Not responding can save you from escalation. Many conflicts intensify because each side reacts to the last shot rather than stepping back. A quick reply written in anger fuels another angry reply, and before long you are embroiled in a fight that consumes days or weeks of thought and shakes relationships. Silence or delayed response interrupts that loop. It gives the emotional temperature time to drop and creates space for perspective. Often, what feels urgent in the first few minutes or hours loses its urgency after some reflection. Choosing not to respond immediately is not passive, it is active conflict management. There is also a practical economy to silence. Your attention is the scarcest resource you have. It determines the quality of your work, relationships, and inner life. Every unnecessary response takes a sliver of that attention and compounds the mental load of monitoring, remembering, and planning follow-ups. Saying nothing protects your focus and reduces the overhead of social maintenance. It allows you to preserve energy for things that actually matter: deep work, meaningful conversations, rest, and creative thinking. That said, not responding is not a blanket rule. It is a choice that should be guided by purpose and context. Emergencies, responsibilities, and safety concerns require prompt action. Legal and financial obligations, work deadlines, or caring for someone in immediate need are not negotiable. The useful middle ground is a triage mindset. When a message arrives, ask 3 quick questions. Is this time sensitive? Is it my responsibility? Will my response materially change the outcome? If the answer to one or more is yes, respond appropriately. If not, allow silence to be your tool. Practical habits make this easier. Build brief filters into your routine. Schedule specific times to check and answer email rather than doing it continuously. Use Do Not Disturb windows on your phone. Create short, reusable replies for low-stakes messages. Set expectations with colleagues and loved ones about response times. Practice the simple phrase, "I need time to think about that." It buys breathing room and signals intention without burning bridges. Learn to triage social media notifications, like, mute, archive, or block as appropriate so your attention is not hijacked by trivial updates. For particularly fraught interactions, write a draft reply and let it sit for an hour or overnight. Often you will delete or soften it, which means you avoided an escalation. Silence also functions as a boundary and a form of communication in itself. Not responding to repeated requests that ignore your limits can be a way of protecting your capacity and teaching others how to treat you. If someone repeatedly texts late at night expecting immediate answers, not tolerating that pattern, by not replying until morning or by explicitly stating your boundaries, helps recalibrate expectations. That said, when silence could be misinterpreted by a close relationship, it is kinder to set the expectation, explain that you need time to process, or tell someone when you will reply. Boundaries are most humane when they are transparent rather than punitive. Emotionally, refusing to respond to every provocation cultivates resilience. Jealous, angry, or shaming comments seldom require engagement. Replying tends to validate the drama and feed it. A calm non-response preserves dignity and frees you from the need to be right in the moment. Over time, not answering every call to reaction teaches you that your value is not tied to how quickly you can defend or explain yourself. It gives you permission to be deliberate, not reactive. There are social costs and cultural nuances to consider. In some contexts, silence can be read as rude or disengaged. In professional settings, a no-response policy without prior arrangement can harm team cohesion. The trick is to be intentional. If you will not answer within an hour, set an auto-reply. If you will not answer on weekends, communicate that boundary. For relationships where frequent contact is expected, explain your rhythm so others do not take silence personally. A well-placed one-liner, "I can't reply thoughtfully right now, can we talk tomorrow?" often calms anxieties and preserves the relationship without sacrificing your rest. Ultimately, not responding to everything is an act of stewardship of your inner life. It is a small discipline with outsized returns, clearer thinking, fewer dramas, stronger boundaries, and more time for work that matters. It is also a practice of humility, accepting that not every slight needs correcting, not every rumor needs refuting, and not every invitation is a duty. Choosing when to speak and when to remain silent is one of the simplest ways to live with intention. Silence does not mean absence, often it makes space for better presence later. You don't need permission to start. You don't need permission to start because waiting for someone else to validate your dreams is the fastest way to let them die. Many people spend years hesitating, convincing themselves that the right time, the right resources, or the right approval will come. They wait for a boss to assign the role they want, for society to recognize their potential, for friends or family to give their blessing, or for circumstances to feel perfect. But that moment rarely arrives. Life does not hand out formal invitations to pursue what matters, it only offers opportunities disguised as uncertainty. The truth is that most of the limitations we perceive are self-imposed, created by fear of judgment, failure, or rejection. We tell ourselves stories that make us comfortable in inaction. I'm not ready, I'm not qualified, what if they laugh at me? But readiness is not a prerequisite for starting, it is the result of starting. Every creator, innovator, and leader you admire began without guarantees. They did not wait for someone to anoint them, they chose themselves. The first book was written before the writer had an audience. The first business was launched before the founder had investors. The first speech was delivered before the speaker had confidence. Action is the teacher, not permission. When you start, you gain information you cannot get from thinking alone. You learn by doing, by testing, failing, adjusting, and trying again. Each step you take builds competence, and competence builds confidence. Confidence is not a prerequisite, it is a byproduct of progress. The idea of needing permission often comes from the systems we grow up in, schools, workplaces, even families, where authority figures reward compliance and discourage risk. We internalize the belief that someone else knows best, that we need credentials or approval before we can claim an identity. But creativity, entrepreneurship, and personal growth do not work that way. There is no official certificate for being a writer, a designer, an entrepreneur, a leader. You become those things by doing the work, not by waiting for someone to declare you ready. The gatekeepers you fear often do not exist. The only real gatekeeper is hesitation. Starting without permission also means embracing imperfection. People wait because they want their first attempt to be flawless. They fear embarrassment or criticism, so they postpone. But mastery never comes before motion. The first draft will be messy. The first video will be awkward. The first product will have flaws. This is not a sign of failure, it is the process. Perfectionism is often disguised fear, the fear of being seen trying. But every expert was once a beginner willing to be imperfect in public. Every masterpiece hides a mountain of discarded attempts. If you cannot tolerate imperfection, you cannot achieve excellence. There is also a psychological freedom in starting without permission. It removes excuses. If you stop waiting for external validation, you reclaim control over your destiny. You no longer depend on luck, timing, or someone else's opinion. You step into agency. You realize that the power to begin is always yours, whether the world applauds or not. That kind of autonomy is rare because it demands courage, the courage to move when no one is watching, to build when no one believes, to risk when nothing is guaranteed. But it is also liberating, because you stop asking, "Will they let me?" and start asking, "How far can I go?" History is full of proof. Entrepreneurs who started businesses in garages without investors. Artists who created masterpieces without galleries. Inventors who worked in obscurity before changing the world. They understood a simple truth: if you wait for permission, you'll wait forever. The world moves forward because of people who act before they feel ready, who trust their own vision enough to begin. If they fail, they learn. If they succeed, they create something no one else could have given them permission to make. The beauty of starting without permission is that it builds momentum. Action breeds clarity. The first step reveals the second. When you hesitate, problems seem larger and solutions unclear. When you move, reality replaces speculation. You discover what works, what doesn't, and what to try next. Starting is not the guarantee of success, but it is the guarantee of growth. Inaction guarantees nothing but regret. You don't need permission because the permission slip you are waiting for does not exist. No one else can authorize your dream because it belongs to you. The world does not ask for credentials, it asks for contribution. If you have something to give, something to create, something to say, start now, where you are, with what you have. Begin imperfectly. Begin small. Begin without applause. Begin even if fear walks beside you. Because the only real mistake is waiting for a sign that will never come, when the power to start has always been in your hands. Your network is your net worth. The saying that your network is your net worth speaks to the idea that the people you surround yourself with, the relationships you build, and the trust you cultivate often matter as much as, if not more than, the skills and resources you individually possess. Opportunities rarely exist in isolation, they flow through human connections. Jobs are often filled through referrals before they are ever posted, businesses thrive because of partnerships and introductions, and personal growth accelerates when you are surrounded by mentors, peers, and friends who challenge and inspire you. In this sense, your true wealth is not only measured by money or possessions but also by the strength and depth of the relationships you nurture. At the core of this lesson is the recognition that no one succeeds alone. Behind every achievement are countless invisible contributions from others, teachers who shared knowledge, friends who offered encouragement, colleagues who opened doors, mentors who guided with wisdom, and even rivals who sharpened ambition. A strong network is like fertile soil, it nourishes and sustains growth. Without it, even the most talented individual may struggle to gain traction, while someone with modest resources but a rich network often finds doors opening in unexpected places. Connections extend reach, multiply possibilities, and create pathways that would otherwise remain hidden. The value of a network lies not just in what others can do for you but also in what you can do for them. Networking is often misunderstood as self-serving, as if its only purpose is to collect contacts for personal gain. In reality, a healthy network is built on reciprocity and genuine interest in others. When you offer value, whether by sharing knowledge, providing support, making introductions, or celebrating others' successes, you become someone people trust and want to help in return. This mutual exchange creates resilience, because a network built only on extraction will eventually collapse, but one built on contribution thrives and compounds over time. Another dimension of this lesson is the way your network shapes your mindset and growth. You absorb the attitudes, habits, and aspirations of the people closest to you. If you surround yourself with people who settle for mediocrity, you may unconsciously lower your own standards. But if your circle includes those who aim higher, who think creatively, who work diligently, and who hold themselves accountable, you are more likely to rise to that level. Your network becomes a mirror, reflecting back not only who you are but also who you are becoming. In this sense, choosing and cultivating your relationships carefully is one of the most powerful forms of self-investment. The phrase also reflects a practical truth about access. Resources are unevenly distributed in the world, and information does not travel equally to everyone. A strong network gives you access to knowledge you might not discover on your own, to opportunities that are never advertised, and to insights drawn from the experiences of others. This kind of access is invaluable. It saves time, prevents mistakes, and accelerates progress. A conversation with the right person at the right moment can change the entire trajectory of a career or a business. Without a network, you are limited to what you personally know and can do. With one, you tap into collective intelligence and shared opportunity. Trust is the currency of a network, and like financial wealth, it must be managed wisely. If you exploit connections, break promises, or approach relationships with selfish motives, you deplete that currency quickly. But if you consistently show up with integrity, keep your word, and treat others with respect, your reputation grows, and with it, the willingness of others to invest their time and resources in you. Over years, this trust compounds, and your network becomes an enduring source of support that can carry you through challenges and amplify your successes. Importantly, this lesson applies beyond the professional world. In personal life, your network of family, friends, and community is your safety net. It is what sustains you in moments of crisis, loss, or uncertainty. Money may provide comfort, but it cannot replace the emotional, practical, and moral support of people who care for you. Wealth in relationships is the kind of wealth that cannot be stolen or devalued. It deepens with time and enriches life in ways material possessions never can. At the same time, this idea carries a responsibility to be intentional about the networks you build. Not all connections are equal. Some relationships drain rather than uplift, sow doubt instead of encouragement, and exploit rather than support. Recognizing which connections strengthen your life and which weaken it is essential. A network is not about quantity but quality. Better to have a smaller circle of trust and mutual respect than a large circle of shallow contacts. Curating your environment, seeking out people who embody values you admire, and being deliberate about who you invest your time in ensures that your network truly becomes your net worth. Ultimately, this life lesson teaches that wealth is not only measured in bank accounts or material gains but in human capital, the richness of trust, respect, and support that flows through relationships. To invest in people is to invest in yourself. To nurture genuine connections is to create a foundation for growth that is more enduring than any possession. Your network is your net worth because, in the end, success, resilience, and fulfillment are all intertwined with the people who walk beside you, teach you, challenge you, and open doors for you along the way. Comfort zone kills growth. The comfort zone is seductive because it offers safety, predictability, and ease. It is the space where routines are familiar, risks are minimal, and uncertainty is avoided. At first glance, it feels like the ideal place to live, free from stress and fear. But beneath that apparent safety lies a hidden danger: stagnation. Growth, whether personal, professional, or emotional, does not occur in the realm of familiarity. It happens in discomfort, in the moments when you challenge yourself beyond what feels easy. The comfort zone promises security, but it silently robs you of progress, potential, and the richness of life. Human beings are wired for adaptation. Our minds and bodies grow stronger in response to stress, not in its absence. Muscles develop when subjected to resistance. Skills sharpen when tested under pressure. Confidence builds when you step into the unknown and prove to yourself that you can handle it. Staying in your comfort zone denies you these challenges, and without challenges, you do not grow, you remain the same. And while remaining the same might sound acceptable in the short term, in the long run it breeds mediocrity and regret. The world is constantly evolving, and if you do not evolve with it, you fall behind, not just in achievements but in resilience and fulfillment. The comfort zone is deceptive because it feels like a shield against failure, but in reality, it becomes a prison. You may think avoiding risk protects you, but it also prevents you from learning. Every time you sidestep discomfort, you reinforce fear. You tell your brain, "I can't handle that," and that belief calcifies over time. The longer you remain comfortable, the harder it becomes to break free because your tolerance for uncertainty weakens. What once felt like a small risk begins to feel insurmountable simply because you have not practiced courage. Growth requires exposure to uncertainty until it becomes manageable, but if you hide from it, fear expands to fill every space in your life. Comfort zones also kill ambition. When you get too comfortable, you stop striving. You settle for good enough instead of pursuing great. You stop asking big questions about what you truly want because you fear the work, risk, and vulnerability required to attain it. Slowly, without realizing it, you begin to shrink your dreams to fit your current reality rather than expanding your reality to fit your dreams. Life becomes a series of predictable routines, safe but colorless. You may avoid failure, but you also avoid adventure, growth, and the deep sense of accomplishment that comes only from doing something hard. Breaking out of the comfort zone is uncomfortable by design. It triggers fear because your brain interprets the unfamiliar as danger. But discomfort is not danger, it is a signal that you are entering new territory where learning happens. Every skill you now take for granted, walking, reading, driving, was once uncomfortable. Imagine if you had avoided that discomfort, you would still be crawling. This principle never changes. What feels awkward today will feel effortless tomorrow if you push through. Discomfort is the currency of growth. You cannot buy progress with ease, you must pay with challenge. The irony is that the comfort zone is not truly comfortable in the long run. Over time, it breeds boredom, dissatisfaction, and a gnawing sense of, "Is this all there is?" Humans crave progress because progress gives life meaning. When you stop growing, you feel stuck, even if everything looks stable from the outside. That restlessness you feel when life becomes too predictable is your potential calling you forward. Ignore it long enough, and it turns into regret. People rarely regret stepping out of their comfort zones, but they often regret staying in them too long. Stepping out does not mean recklessness, it means intentional stretching. It means setting goals that scare you a little but excite you a lot. It means saying yes to opportunities you feel unprepared for and trusting you will learn along the way. It means risking failure not because you enjoy failing but because you understand that failure teaches more than safety ever could. Every time you embrace discomfort, your comfort zone expands. What once terrified you becomes routine, and your sense of capability grows. This cycle of expansion is how people achieve extraordinary things, not by waiting for confidence but by acting before it arrives. Life rewards those who dare to leave comfort for growth. The greatest experiences, traveling to unknown places, starting a business, speaking in public, loving deeply, come with uncertainty and fear at first. But on the other side of that fear is freedom. The comfort zone feels like safety, but it is actually confinement. The growth zone feels like risk, but it is where life begins to open. Comfort lulls you into a quiet death of potential, while discomfort brings you alive. The question is never whether discomfort is hard, it always is. The question is whether you value growth enough to choose it over the illusion of safety. Because in the end, everything you want, confidence, success, wisdom, resilience, lives outside the boundaries of comfort. To stay comfortable is to stay the same. To grow is to choose discomfort again and again, until it becomes your new normal, and then to stretch once more. Self-discipline is freedom. Discipline and freedom have always been seen as opposites. People often assume that to be free is to live without restraint, to act however one pleases, to follow only desire and impulse. On the surface, this feels appealing. What could be better than being free of rules? But life is more complex than that, and when you look beyond the surface, you begin to see that such unrestrained living is not true freedom at all. It is a kind of slavery, one that binds you to the shifting demands of your body, your emotions, and your whims. Without discipline, your choices are no longer truly yours. You may think you are choosing freely, but in reality, you are being pulled by forces you cannot resist. Self-discipline is the force that returns control to you. It is the conscious act of choosing what is best for your future over what feels comfortable in the present. This is not about harshness or self-denial for its own sake. It is about understanding that every action you take today shapes the options you will or will not have tomorrow. The disciplined person recognizes that true freedom lies not in momentary indulgence, but in long-term independence. To wake up early, to eat responsibly, to save money, to exercise, to study, to finish work when it must be done, these acts can feel restrictive in the moment, but they buy back vast amounts of freedom later. Consider health. A person who eats without discipline, who neglects exercise, who indulges in every craving, may feel free in the moment. But over time, that freedom shrinks as health deteriorates. They are no longer free to run, to travel with ease, or to live without medication. They have traded long-term freedom for short-term pleasure. In contrast, someone who disciplines themselves to exercise regularly and eat well does not live in chains. Their routine gives them energy, strength, and the ability to live actively for decades. Their discipline has purchased freedom from preventable illness, fatigue, and dependence. The same principle applies to money. Someone who spends impulsively feels free when they buy whatever catches their eye. But soon, debt and financial stress bind them tightly. They are no longer free to choose a career they love because they must chase money to pay off their obligations. They cannot take risks, travel, or even rest without worry. On the other hand, the disciplined saver, who resists impulse purchases and manages their spending, slowly builds security. Their discipline may look like sacrifice, but in truth it grants them the freedom to take time off, to choose opportunities without fear, and to live life with fewer limits. Discipline even expands into the realm of thought and emotion. Someone who lacks self-control reacts to anger, fear, or envy without pause. They say words they regret, make rash choices, and let moods dictate their behavior. They feel free to express themselves, but this freedom enslaves them to emotional storms. A disciplined mind, however, learns to pause, to reflect, to master the self before acting. This person is freer, not because they suppress their emotions, but because they are not ruled by them. They are free to respond with clarity, to choose peace over chaos, to shape their relationships rather than destroy them impulsively. At its core, self-discipline is about aligning your daily actions with your higher values and long-term goals. It transforms you from being a passenger in your own life into the driver. Without it, you drift wherever habit and impulse take you. With it, you chart your own course and walk it with strength. This is why discipline is not the enemy of freedom but its greatest protector. There is also a deeper paradox here. When you first impose discipline, it feels heavy. It requires effort, sacrifice, and persistence. But over time, it becomes lighter. What once felt like a burden becomes habit, and habit creates ease. The disciplined person eventually moves through life with less struggle than the undisciplined, because they are not constantly fighting crises of their own making. Their discipline creates order, and order creates peace. Thus, self-discipline is not chains but wings. It frees you from the tyranny of laziness, gluttony, fear, and impulse. It frees you from dependence on others to fix the problems your lack of control creates. It frees you to become the kind of person you aspire to be, someone who can live with integrity and purpose. Discipline may ask for effort in the moment, but it gives back a life that is larger, stronger, freer, and more your own.